Hey everybody, welcome back to Word Balloon. This is John Suntress. If you haven't been noticing, I've been upping my video output as much as my audio output here on Word Balloon. Many of our conversations are also live video streams as they happen, so make sure you're going to Word Balloon's YouTube channel to check out some great conversations there. They are likely the same conversations you're hearing here as audio product, but I do want to make you aware of that, and please subscribe to Word Balloon's video channel on YouTube. And also I'll be broadcasting a lot of those live chats on my Facebook page, John Suntress, because I know a lot of people check them out there as well. Questions or comments about the show, reach me via email, john@wordballoon.com. Scroll down the episode list. You might see more than you realize because I'm almost putting out Word Balloons on a nearly daily basis. So I don't want you to miss any of the great episodes that I've been putting out these most recent days. There might be one more commercial. If there is, thank you for listening, and thank you for your attention. Hey everybody, welcome back to Word Balloon, the comic book conversation show. John Suntress here. You know, weird timing. We're in the midst of the lockdown, and all of a sudden in mid-April, there's a new Ed Brubaker, Marcos Martin digital comic. When there's no other comics to be had, here's a brand new comic through Panel Syndicate. Friday. It's fantastic. The first issue is out. It has that Panel Syndicate model of pay what you want. In fact, you can get it for free. And it's quite the success, and I'm really happy for Ed and Marcos. And Ed is here today, Ed Brubaker, to discuss the release of the book and his thoughts on digital comics compared to when they first came out. God, 10 years ago is really, when things were really in full swing with digital, and everyone was really afraid of the market changing. Well, the market is changing for different reasons now. We don't even know what it's going to be, and Ed talks a lot about that. A lot of behind-the-scenes information on Fridays, the conception, and talking to Marcos about the look of the book and the characters and his inspiration for this story in general. We also talk about Pulp, his brand new book with Sean Philips that's coming out later this year. Everything's on a sliding scale because of the lockdown and because of Diamond shutting down and everything that was going on. And Ed talks a lot about that and reacting as his own, experiences as a creator that had to kind of move things along as far as this year and, income that he was counting on. And just like every other creator that has faced the pencils down situation. We also talk about some movie and television recommendations and other things on Ed's mind. It's a great conversation. I'm really happy to present it to you today on Word Balloon. Ed Brubaker for a nice, meaty 2.5-hour conversation. All brought to you by Aftershock Comics, my dear friends at Aftershock who are standing by me and standing by you with great books. Consult your local comic book shop and see what they have in their back stock of Aftershock, but also good news. Diamond is coming back with shipping near the end of the month, and we've got things like Disaster Incorporated on May 20th when Diamond comes back, written by Joe Harris, drawn by Sebastian Perez, and then on May 27th, another new Aftershock book, Dead Day #1, from Ryan Parrott and Yevgeny Bornyakov. You want to learn more? Go to their website. You'll find full story descriptions, preview art pages. They both look great. And the diamond codes on how to order these books through your local shop at AftershockComics.com. Word Balloon is also brought to you by the League of Word Balloon listeners, my great friends that help me via Patreon every week, patreon.com/wordballoon. Word Balloon is free. It'll always be free, but you can tell I've been upping the product certainly since the lockdown and since I lost my day job in radio, and trying to make Word Balloon a regular thing that you can count on with great content every day. Wonderful in-depth interviews that I'm trying to provide here. Also video interviews happening. Great things happening this week as we speak. I'll be releasing I'll be broadcasting live, talking to Matthew Rosenberg on Wednesday night, taking your questions. Also, Scotty Young will be on Thursday night on Word Balloon's YouTube channel. Check that out. And again, all because of what's been happening with the League of Word Balloon listeners. I've been able to, subscribe to a streaming service to provide some stuff. I know there's Zoom, but there's some things about Zoom that are restrictions that make it easy for, kind of like Skype kind of conversations. But I think StreamYards has really been helping out and will continue to help out when Zoom resumes its pay model. They're being generous right now during the lockdown. But anyway, trying to take care of you with great video and audio content on an almost daily basis here at Word Balloon. So that's due to the good graces of the League of Word Balloon listeners. And I thank you greatly, League, for your support. If you want to help out, if you think Word Balloon is worth $1 a month or worth the price of a comic book a month, go to patreon.com/wordballoon. But thank you greatly. Your domino mask and cape are in the mail, League of Word Balloon listeners. All right, without further ado, let's get into it now. A really fun conversation with Ed Brubaker. Man, it's so great. I just talked to him a year ago, and here we are again. Friday and Pulp, two brand new products on the way. Also, Cruel Summer coming, a criminal collection that'll be coming later this summer. So really neat stuff on the way. If you haven't been keeping up to date on your Ed Brubaker product, you've got Panel Syndicate has you covered with the first issue of Friday, and Pulp will be coming out later this summer from Image, him and Sean Philips. Let's talk to Ed Brubaker right now on Word Balloon. Ed Brubaker, welcome back to Word Balloon. As always, man, it's great to talk to you.
Oh, thanks, man. Thanks for having me.
Interesting timing, Ed. I mean, none of us expected a pandemic, but you've got this brand new comic digitally from Panel Syndicate, Friday, great start, and ironic timing. What else can I say?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I was really pushing last year when Marcos was just starting on all the character sketches and design for the city and everything. I was like, in early September, I'm like, oh man, we could probably put this out for Christmas because it takes place over Christmas. That would be great. And Marcos was like, yeah, right. And then he spent like another 3 months doing character designs and agonizing over every decision of how to lay out the comic. And once he landed on like how he was going to draw it and what it was going to look like and like what his inking style was going to be, like he moved pretty quick actually. But it was, just coincidental timing in that like, I think we probably would have been out about a month earlier if the shutdown hadn't happened and that sort of slowed down work progress on his side because suddenly him and his wife are at home with their kids and having to deal with that like for half of the day or more. And then he said he was often sitting there drawing and watching his son like build these giant Lego things that would fall apart all over the house.
I love the look of the book, and immediately, and it was interesting to read the afterword because I was thinking Edward Gorey, and it reminded me of those great opening animations they used to do on PBS for their mystery anthology show. Yeah. I love Gorey. That was the main thing. Was I was like looking at what Marcos had done in the last couple Panel Syndicate things, and just his art in general. I've always loved his style as I've watched it sort of morph over the years. And I thought the last couple things that he'd done, his art almost looked more like a 30s adventure strip crossed with like Chester Brown or some old school like illustrator kind of look that he was bringing in. And I just was looking at it and I just suddenly thought, if there were like cross-hatching lines or even just straight up and down lines here, it would almost look like an Edward Gorey, Tove Jansson kind of a thing. And then it just all collided in my head, and I just thought, oh shit, I can do my like grown-up young adult idea, and we can, and so I pitched that to him. It was funny because I think in his email he said the only thing he didn't want to have to draw was something like demons or monsters. And I was like, well, it'll be kind of Lovecrafty. Like most of that stuff will be kept in the shadows, and what we do see will be up to your interpretation. But I pitched it back to him, and he said he'd been thinking about trying to incorporate like cross-hatching into whatever he did next. So he was like inspired by it, and then we just kind of emailed back and forth for a couple of days about it, and but he committed almost immediately. He was like, this sounds great. And I was like, all right, cool. And then I started writing up like stuff about the different characters and sending those to him, and he'd start doing sketches. It was really fun. And it was one of those like, we don't have a deadline, because he wasn't worried about, he just wanted to sort of work on it at his own pace. And I was like deep into like legendary TV stuff and criminal. So I was like, okay, great. As long as it's like a side thing. And now that we've got it out, like we're both like full time. I feel like this and the thing I'm writing for Sean right now, and I'm just waiting to hear on some TV stuff. It's like my whole life is now these two comics, so it's a lot of fun. But the putting it out during the pandemic, where there's also a comic book shutdown, I was like, shit, like
I kind of went back and forth, like, should we release it now? Like, is it like, are we getting like an unfair advantage because the rest of the world, like so much of the world is shut down? But then I was like, man, like audiobooks and digital and Kindle book sales and video game digital sales, or all this stuff is just like through the roof because everyone's stuck at home wanting like things to entertain themselves. And we were having so much fun, like putting the book together, that I just thought, you know what I don't think about when I'm working on this book or looking at the pages that Marcos is doing or Munsa, like I'm not thinking about the pandemic. I'm not thinking I'm stuck at home. I'm thinking how cool it is that I get to work on this book. So I was like, maybe people, when they read the book, will have that same sensation of like, because I feel like the art that they did for that book, you can just look at those pages over and over again and imagine that whole world. Like those street scenes, like I get the sense that all those people have a story, you know, like they really went all out to create that world. And it was just so much fun to see it come together. So, you know, of course, we released it on like the day of the launch of that, the big Creators for Comics auctions, which raised like $500,000. So it was, even though we got, I thought, a fair amount of press, it took a few days for even people in comics to realize we'd released it. Like, even though we were on like all the comic sites and we got like Hollywood Reporter and AV Club and all these places. But yeah, I was hearing from people for like a week or so after the thing came out that they were just discovering it that day because someone like retweeted it or sent it to them or something, and I was like, shit, I thought we got a lot of PR, but still, it's like the signal to noise right now is very hard to break through. I mean, obviously, there's a lot going on in the world, and everyone has valid things to be freaking out about on the internet or trying to push on the internet. So it was weird, but I think the reader response has been insane. Like more feedback on this than probably anything I've done since Captain America. Wow. Like, and the amount of people writing in to talk about their favorite young adult things. So I asked, like, write us in and tell us what your favorites were.
Yeah.
And there's so many of them that I've never even heard of before.
Oh,
like
cool.
But they see little bits and pieces of their favorites in like Friday and Lance. So it's really interesting to see how you can kind of use those archetypes a little bit and create your own characters around them. And people get that kind of nostalgia response from it, which is what I really wanted, was that sort of, everyone can sort of be wrapped in the nostalgia of the 70s for a brief period of time.
Absolutely. Well, and also, I loved your afterword because you talked about going back to the library. And am I right? You were basically kind of breaking down like how these books would operate, and especially the references you made. And I don't know if I saw them more, and you likely did as well, when you mentioned things like the Great Brain books, which I loved as a kid,
yeah, and
also Encyclopedia Brown. But the more I think about it now, they were kind of that tweener, like 12 to 14, or maybe a little bit younger. Tell me about that.
And probably young adult stuff is probably aimed at any kid that's smart enough to want to read the book.
Sure.
You see kids that are 8 reading Harry Potter, and it's
right.
Like, Harry Potter's like 11 when he starts. So I think young adult technically is that age group between like 10 and 16 or something, and then after that.
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't know what they officially call it. I was talking to Kelly Sue about Friday like months ago, and I was describing it as post YA, and she was saying that, because I was like, well, it's got like swearing and fucking and murder and stuff in it eventually, and she's like, well, I mean, The Hunger Games is considered YA and it's got all that stuff, and I was like, oh shit, you're right.
Yeah. I
was like, I guess YA has gotten a lot hardcore since, because like The Hunger Games or the Twilight is technically YA. They like have a fucking baby in there and they like rip people's heads off. So clearly, like my version of, but still, you get the idea. Like post YA is more like the, when the YA hero has to hit reality. But I always liked that kind of idea. Like there was a book, maybe 20 years ago, 15 or 20 years ago, there was a book that was sort of a take on like Encyclopedia Brown growing up that was called Brown Harvest.
I remember that. Yes, it did. Yes.
But and my friend Sarah Grand does one of my favorite series of books it's called the Claire DeWitt series, and she's got 3 of them out so far. And it's just one of the greatest things ever, because it's sort of like if David Lynch had written like a series of like about a hero of a young adult thing. It's just hard to describe. It's like very arty and strange and almost stream of consciousness. This person just telling you a story, but the main character is this girl who grew up being a detective, who's like now an adult detective, and she deals with like real world cases and stuff. But it often leads to like weird flights of fancy and like stories about her youth and stuff. And I always just loved those books. So it's just like one of my favorite things, because it's like the reader brings in a certain something. It's like the same shortcut when you write like Captain America or Daredevil. Like the reader comes in with a certain amount of knowledge of who these people are, and it allows you to sort of play with their expectations a little bit, or just have a more instant connection to your main character in a way.
Tell me about developing King's Row, right? King's Row or King's Hill?
King's Hill.
Excuse me. Of course, the Ronald Reagan movie King's Row. So yeah, King's Hill. Excuse me.
Yeah, King's Hill. That was more just trying to find a way to mix that sort of small town young adult vibe with the sort of Lovecraftian, like Arkham, New England kind of vibe, so that you have a story that has a little bit of both of that, like some creepy cult stuff, but it looks like this quaint little town. And some of that was like emailing Joe Hill to sort of get insight on what small towns felt like in the 70s and what the culture was like there. How white were they? Very. Just stuff like that. And that was actually really helpful. And it's funny because I emailed Joe like pages from it, and it wasn't until I was emailing Joe the page at the train station where it says King's Hill that I realized, I was like, oh shit. I was like, hey, this isn't intentional, but the town is named King's Hill. Which is like Stephen King and Joe Hill. So, but I was like, but if you're gonna have like a haunted New England town, you might as well like do a nod to like the two, like the New England horror royalty.
100%, man. How long is the story gonna be?
Hard to say. At least 7 chapters for this one. The idea is to keep doing more of these after we finish this first book, just depending on how, unless Marcos gets totally sick of it by the end. But I feel like I could write Friday, for years already. Like I have ideas for other stories. It's like, I think I told Marcos it would be like 5 or 6 issues originally before we would be done with the first story. But then it took me to the end of chapter 3 to get to what I thought was going to be the end of chapter 1, because I realized I had to spend so much more time with the characters and getting to know the characters before I really start doing the parts where that becomes a little bit more subversive.
Okay.
Because like you really needed to know who these kids are. Plus, I just loved seeing him draw everything so much that I was like, oh, I have more ideas. And he sent me character sketches of Friday ice skating, and I'm like, oh, I'm going to do an ice skating scene. And
that's awesome. That's fantastic.
Yeah, so it's. But then after we published the first one, he's like, all right, only 4 more to go. And I'm like, 4 more? What are you talking about? This thing might go like 8 or 9 issues. And his panicked thing back, and I'm like, I might be able to wrap it up by 7. But I was like, I started thinking, I'm like, what does it matter? Like, we're publishing it digitally, and then we'll put it out as a book whenever it's done. So however many pages it needs to be. I mean, I also thought a lot of the chapters would be closer to like 16 or 18 pages. And so far, like the first one was 28 after Marcos added a few pages to it, I think. And then the second one came out longer, and he's now adding pages to that one too. So that one's going to be close to 40 pages altogether, actually. And really nothing happens in that chapter either.
Oh, that's all right. It's a character piece. That's okay.
Yeah, no, it is literally, it's like the backstory chapter where you learn everything you need to know about these characters. But a ton happens, and there's like some amazing sequences in it. But it's a lot of stuff for him to show off on the art.
Isn't this great, Ed, that you can honestly pace a story on your own and not have to deal anymore with the big two requirements of deadline art, that it has to be ready in 30 days and then likely before that in terms of a production standpoint. I mean, I remember when you were leaving Marvel and talking about 18 issues a month and how it really was kind of sapping you creatively. I mean,
I mean, I like putting stuff out as often as humanly possible.
Sure.
But there are weird things about, I mean, I love single issue comics personally. Like I always put a lot of effort into our single issue comics to inspire other people to put more effort into theirs. But partly because I just want these things to feel like they're worth the money. But it's always driven me crazy that there's a certain page count limit. Like, oh, my story must end at this point, at this page. And like with Sean, it's been easy because, you know, we aim for like 24, but we'll often go to 28 or 32 or whatever we need.
Yep.
And that's our choice. And that's because Sean is able to still go ahead and draw the extra pages because he's fast and reliable. But I like the idea of just writing a story and letting each chapter just sort of be however many pages it needs to be. And, you know, putting it out digitally first, it's perfect. You know, it's like you think of the book as the ultimate version of it that you're building. So you can almost look at it like you're publishing a first draft. Like if I look back at this and realize like, oh, we need to add a sequence here or whatever, like I can totally do that. Like the book version then can become like almost like a director's cut or a definitive edition.
Sure.
You know, we have like tons of extras for the print version too, because I've like 40 pages of character sketches and stuff from Marcus.
That's awesome. I have no doubt, Ed. And I mean, again, I know that that's always been a concern, and that's been the great things about a lot of your creator-owned stuff. Tons of back matter. You make each issue count. And it's interesting. We were talking before we started recording, and you were telling me about, you know, when initially digital comics, you know, appeared, that there was a great fear, and it was, you know, industry-wide that, oh, God, you know, what's going to happen to the stores? What's going to happen to the paper product? So, yeah, what are your thoughts on, like, then and now?
Well, then versus now, like, it felt like a very real threat. Like, especially, I remember someone was showing around, like, a platform before Comixology became the thing that everybody got. There was another one. I can't remember what it was called now.
Was that Rance's thing?
Yeah. Thing. I remember we went over and looked at it, and he was showing us how you'd be able to do it through your PlayStation and stuff. And where we all walked out of that room, and somebody turning to me and being like, well, you know, I mean, comics was nice, but I guess it's over. We all just assumed that, like, people would just want to read digital stuff. And then when the iPad came out, we were like, oh, that's a game changer. Like, everyone's going to just want to read comics on their screen instead. And, you know, over the years, there's been studies about it. There's been all sorts of stats about it, at least for comics. And I think it's probably the same for books. I think most people would still rather read books in print. The comics that have done really well as digital comics have been the ones that are either really cheap or just free, that are put up online like daily, and then they build like these huge audiences through like gag cartoons and stuff. Mm-hmm. So that's not that different than like newspaper strips in a way.
Sure.
But the single issue monthly published digitally versions that are exactly the same price as the print comics is like, that's always been insane to me. Marcus and I were talking about that. I think that's part of why he wanted to do Panel Syndicate the way it is, where it's just like a pay whatever you want thing. And because you're just selling PDFs, there's no printing involved. Mm-hmm. And instead of even just setting a price to compete with print or whatever, like, first off, like, nothing on Panel Syndicate is also available in print at the exact same time. So it's not competing with the comic store version of the same thing. So it gets to sidestep that. But yeah, it's just like, it feels crazy to me that anyone would want to pay more than, you know, that anyone would want to pay $4 or $5 for a digital comic that's like 20 pages of material. Like, that's just fucking crazy.
Yeah.
And, but like, those of us inside comics talk about it all the time. Like, how much more would these things have spread 10 years ago when everyone was really excited about it if all the digital comics were 50 cents or 99 cents or whatever? Or how many people subscribe to these services like the Marvel like digital thing, or the Comixology digital subscription thing where you can read like the first books of a bunch of stuff. And like, I'm super anti subscription services other than, you know, the digital media ones that I've basically like given my life over to. But for like print stuff and for music, like I know too many musicians and writers, and we all get almost nothing for any of these subscription service things. So it's all just about like finding new audiences. But, you know, like the thing with Panel Syndicate that was exciting was, okay, we're going to serialize a book digitally. We're going to put it out on this platform that's set up to just give the money directly to the creators from the readers, and the readers get to decide how much they want to pay. And it's been interesting about, Marcos will probably get mad at me for getting the stats, but like a little over half the amount of people who've downloaded the thing have paid, actually, which he said is up from like their previous stuff a little bit. But the people who pay are paying like really generously. I think the average is, you know, about the same as they would have paid for like a monthly comic, because they just want to support the thing existing. And then all the people who don't pay, you know, like they just are reading the book and, you know, hopefully passing it around to other people. So it's really interesting. Like I was talking to Marcos about it, and I thought you'd be better off setting a price. And he said that no, what you'll find out is that the people who love it and support it will support it more because of that. And so it's been really interesting to see. Like it's done really well for, you know, for a digital comic especially. And Panel Syndicate hadn't had a new book up for over a year. And since Friday came out, like I know Marcos has been getting contacted by a lot of people. I've had a lot of different friends like email me to ask about it, because we're all sitting here, you know, months into this thing with our industry shut down. A lot of us, like I'm lucky in that I have had work outside of comics. So I have, you know, some Hollywood stuff going on where I've gotten paid for that. And, you know, but like publishing is completely shut down. And it was like the last couple years had been a little bit rough with like the bookstore market and the comic store market to begin with. So having it just completely shut down, there's a lot of people, like a lot of my friends have no income stream all of a sudden, like literally zero income stream until Diamond starts paying publishers again fully, and until distribution comes back and printing. Like printers were shut down. Like our book was stuck at the printer, and now it's scheduled to come out like the end of July, I think, and it was supposed to come out the end of May.
Is that Pulp or is that something else?
Yeah, Pulp was supposed to the last Wednesday of May, and now it's coming out in July, which pushes it to the next quarter.
Right.
So just look at it through a purely like how am I making a living this year kind of phase. It's been a pretty scary fucking year for the entire comics industry the last like few months. A lot of people wondering if they're going to be able to keep their houses, or you know, if they're going to have to go start, you know, drawing superhero comics again, or you know, it's you know, like when I saw publishers saying this is the darkest time I've ever lived through, and I'm like, holy shit. Like, and you know, when you get an email that tells you that like every bookstore chain in the country is shut down, and there's people, you know, saying a lot of these stores may not come back at all. But like, I'm hopeful, because let's face it, like comics is different than so many other industries in general. Like the comic store direct market, like I grew up going to comic stores. Comic stores have never been or rarely been a thing where you get rich running a comic store.
Yep.
And they're always like on really thin margins. The stores I worked for were always just barely scraping by, even though they were these amazing stores. And like, I just feel like the thing that we've ragged on, or a lot of people have ragged on about comic stores having like pull lists and having to tell people, hey, let your store know that you want this on your pull list. Like people go on and on online, like whenever Bendis or anybody would tweet, hey, here's how you get stuff on your pull list. And I know these like snarky kind of comics, the people who aren't really in comics, but they talk about comics all the time.
Yep.
They'll like go off like, oh, don't tell people to do that. And you know what? That's going to be the thing that kept a lot of these stores alive during this, is the fact that they have like this dedicated, there's no, like, I worked at a bookstore. I've worked at several bookstores when I was like in my teens and 20s, and no bookstore I worked at had people who showed up once a week to buy new books. You had some regulars that showed up once or twice a month to just browse and buy the odd thing. But comic stores are like a completely different thing. Like, and you know, the generation of us that have grown up on comic stores is certainly aging, and the comic store owners are certainly aging. But I think, you know, like if Diamond really can start shipping books back to stores, and stores can, you know, at least start contacting their customers and saying, hey, here's what's in stock, what do you want, and do curbside if they're still shut down. Like, I was trying to get some books online and finding it hard to get any shipping, and so I called my local bookstore here, and you know, they're still getting twice a week shipments from their distributor, so I just special ordered the books that I wanted from them, and they're doing curbside pickup. So I was like, all right, well, this is an easy evolution to help the stores that you care about through this, is like, you know, but they need the product to be there for people to want to be like making the trip to the store in this time, especially because I feel like just about everybody I know, whenever they leave the house right now, feels slightly traumatized by the experience. Yeah. Like, is this going to be the one where I get it?
Yeah.
Like,
for real.
That's it. My trip to buy a bunch of LaCroix at the Safeway is going to be the reason I die. It will not be worth it. This is not even the tangerine I wanted.
No, Ed, I make that same 50-50 choice of, all right, I should really get out. Well, do I really need to go out? No, I got food. I got everything. All right, I'll stay in. And again, like you said, too, about needing distractions creatively, I can appreciate what you're saying, because I've been doing almost daily podcasts, and it helps my spirit to do this. And hopefully, I keep saying, and again, it's an old reference. I feel like Bob Hope during World War II. Hey, I'm entertaining the home front. How you doing, everybody? You know,
yeah, just remember that Bob Hope almost got killed by the Nazis and had to crawl through a sewer.
I know that story. That's amazing. I know he almost got shot down doing his tours in Alaska or whatever. Tell me the story.
Yeah, he almost got caught by Nazis in Africa during a USO show once or something, or prepping for a USO show. They were like, suddenly the Nazi forces were there, and him and some other soldiers had to crawl for hours through a sewer or something. Supposedly he got knocked off a stage during a USO show too and injured his back. That's why he legendarily, almost any masseuse will tell you that Bob Hope got a daily massage, which is part of why he lived to be like 110 or whatever.
Oh, that makes sense. Oh, that's very interesting. Jesus.
Yeah, I gotta say, like, one of the things, because I have a lot of like repetitive strain injuries from sitting around and typing too much.
Sure.
Like I get TMJ because I apparently clench my jaw. When
that's terrible, Ed. I know people who have that. Yeah, the clicking thing.
Yeah.
Good Lord.
I've been dealing with it for years, and it's, you know, I've had some different therapies that work that make it better, and you just kind of learn to ignore it, and then it goes away for a while. But like stress just brings it back, and apparently two of my bad writing habits are I will clench my jaw and then stop breathing while I'm writing, like so I'll just hold my breath for like sentences, which is terrible for your blood pressure, and clenching your jaw is terrible for your muscles, especially if you're not breathing at the same time, if you're not letting any oxygen get there. So
Jesus.
Yeah, it's been a fun you know, kind of. Yeah, it's just sitting at home and being like, all right, how much am I clenching my jaw today? Wow, this is super stressful, being at home and wondering if there's going to be, because, you know, like all of Hollywood is shut down too. So I have like a bunch of stuff sort of, you know, slowly moving forward there. And with the whole comics thing, I've just spent the last 2 months racking my brain around like what Sean and I should do next and how we're going to be able to publish it, and, you know, worrying if Diamond was going to go bankrupt, and it looks like that's not going to happen, at least. So that's a bit of a load off for now.
Sure.
But it's like it disrupted our entire year. Like that, Pulp was something we were really counting on for a lot of our income, and now that's not even coming out in the same quarter it was supposed to. And and we're one of the lucky ones. Like a lot of my friends have like best-selling monthly comics that have just been stalling for months now. And it's like it's going to be a rough year for everybody. And if bookstores go out of business, and a lot of bookstores return everything when they go out of business, like the first half of the year, there's no sales. And then the second half of the year, there's a ton of returns. It's going to be a pretty rough year for comics in general and for book publishing in general. And, I think we'll get through the other side because people are still going to want books,
Absolutely.
But it definitely made me start looking at the panel syndicate thing. Like I was doing this with Marcos, and this was going to be my let's see how panel syndicate is. But now I'm looking at it like, well, shit, should more people be doing this? Is this a way that we should be like putting out our books so that we can? Because a lot of times when I'm doing something, I have ideas that I want to do just as a graphic novel, and I don't want it to be published in single issues first and have to be broken down into X amount of pages per issue, or you just want people to just pick the thing up and read the whole thing. I hate the idea that there are people who started the fade out and never read the end, because maybe they would have done that if they bought the graphic novel that was 12 chapters long too. Maybe they would have got halfway through and been like, all right, I hate this. But at least then they have the rest of it if they decide not to.
Yeah.
You can't control whether people are going to read to the end of your book. I know that. But I know that I sold a lot more of Volume 1 than I sold of Volume 3. So that means a lot of people read Volume 1 that never read the end. And that drives me crazy sometimes.
I get it.
So, I like the idea of being able to show work in progress on a graphic novel. But I also like the idea of, because if you do something digitally, you may only be seen by 5,000 or 10,000 people, and then you put out a book and you publish, 40, 50,000 copies of the book. So most of the people who are buying the book never even knew that you put it out digitally to begin with.
Totally. Yeah. Well, and again, playing with format right now, and also as the price point of the 20-page comic. Now the 20-page comic, it'll be interesting to see, to maintain a certain price. Do they go down to 18 pages or whatever? I mean, I remember, and you do likely as well, during the Bronze Age and stuff, that an 18 or 16 page comic was a full comic and stuff. So I wonder if, again, with experimentation and what you're doing with Pulp, releasing it as a graphic novel, a graphic novella perhaps in terms of its size.
Yeah, I mean, I consider like Pulp and My Heroes Have Always Been Junkies to be more like novellas.
Yeah.
Really, they're just kind of long, short stories, but when you turn it into a comic, it comes out to be like 75 pages.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if you try to write like an actual novella-length novella as a comic book, it comes out to be like 300 pages long. It's just like the Pulp was actually, it's interesting because like while I was working on Pulp was something where Sean we talked about doing another graphic novel after a year of Criminal, and then we were going to launch a new monthly comic, which I'll talk about after this.
Okay.
But he wanted to do a Western, and I didn't have any Western ideas, and I've never been like a huge Western fan. I don't think I've ever read like even a Louis L'Amour book or anything.
Okay.
I may have read like some Elmore Leonard Western short stories at one point, like
Sure.
after Get Shorty came out, and I was interested in checking out like everything he did for a while.
Totally.
But I was never like a big Western guy. I've watched The Searchers. I love that movie. There's some Western movies I love. I saw Unforgiven every single day for a month when I was in my mid-20s, when it was playing at this theater that had dollar matinees in Seattle, and I had no job, so every day I would just be the only person in this tiny theater watching Unforgiven at noon. But like I thought, all right, well, Sean draws whatever. He never wants to know what we're doing, and he never asks for anything. He never complains. He just draws, the script. He'll sometimes be like, that's a lot of cars. But I thought, all right, Sean wants to draw a Western. I'll do this. And then I just racked my brains trying to come up with an idea. And of course, the book ends up mostly taking place in 1939 Depression era New York. And I sent it to him. He's like, well, this isn't much of a Western, but it's good. But it's like, it's about the Depression. It's about the 1918 influenza pandemic, actually.
Ironically.
A little bit. And it's about Nazis. And, but it is a Western too. It's because it's about a guy who used to be an outlaw when he was young. And now he's like an old man who writes pulp stories about like a sort of glamorized version of his own adventures.
Oh, cool. Because I was wondering if it was at all inspired by one of my favorite like 70s movies that flies under the radar, Hearts of the West, Jeff Bridges and Andy Griffith, where he's a young pulp writer that, for people who don't know the movie, and totally this is a great Turner Classic movie to search for, and he ends up writing, he starts writing pulp westerns, and then he just finds himself working on like a Poverty Row era Western and meets Andy Griffith and
I
stuff.
didn't even know this.
Oh, dude, I think you'd love it. And also, I'm interested too if because and this is ridiculous, and again, maybe showing our age. I used to like look at my older relatives who would watch Westerns with such love and be like, I don't get it. I was the same way. I was very indifferent, but I've really come to appreciate the character studies that a lot of the great Westerns were. And like you said, with Unforgiven is certainly a great example. But it's like, hey, man, this Bud Bedecker, he really knew what he was doing. And Anthony Mann, these are like really great character pieces.
Oh, yeah, there's a lot of, I mean, I'm sure there's a lot more that I haven't seen. I've seen a lot of samurai movies, which are essentially the same thing, obviously.
Absolutely. Yes.
But it's interesting that like Red Harvest turned into, which is a Depression era like crime story, turns into
Yojimbo.
No, what was it? Well, it's Fistful of Dollars, but Fistful of Dollars is a remake of Yojimbo, I think.
Okay. Oh, it is Yojimbo. Okay. Yeah. I thought so. And yeah, Red Harvest, for people who don't know and are like noir nerds like we are, but Raymond Chandler.
No, it's Dashiell Hammett.
It is Hammett, son of a bitch.
No,
all right, there you go. He won if you're scoring.
It's that first Continental Op novel that he did. But it's like one of his best things ever. It's one of the best stories ever, and it's like it'll never be adapted because there's like some rights issues.
Really?
Yeah, there's somebody's tied up the rights to it. It's a complicated scenario, but yeah, that story, is a detective story, but then it becomes a samurai story, and then the samurai story becomes a Western story starring Clint Eastwood, and it's just like those genres are so tied together that when I started thinking about, well, what is a Western? It's like, well, a Western is a story about somebody sort of up against society. It's just what society is back then is completely different. It's like this Western stories are usually about bank robbers. They're usually about people trying to stop some sort of injustice. They're not always about good people. So it's like they're pretty closely tied to crime stories, even
Sure.
the ones that are more John Wayne-y,
Yeah, I agree. No, you're right about that, man. A man against the system, 100%. And yeah. And the town's against him, High Noon and stuff like that. I mean,
the system is like the one good cop who's in like a corrupt town where it's run by like Westerns in a way are the first anti-corporate kind of thing, because if you look at look at the story of Billy the Kid. The story of Billy the Kid is about a guy who's like, I think the guy, I'm going to get this story wrong, but I believe that he worked for someone who was fucked over by like some larger rancher conglomerate or something and was like caught up in a land war. I know that was the case for Butch Cassidy. He got caught up in some kind of land war in Wyoming or something like that, where these the land barons would just hire crews of mercenaries to go out and just burn people's shit down and and then buy their land from the bank. And so it was like it's all like big business shit, like. So a lot of the Western stuff is like big business, or it's like the fear of the frontier and the unknown. The Searchers is like these guys who are like, I remember an interview with Pelicanos and David Simon about The Wire when they compared the characters on The Wire to the characters in The Searchers. They're just going to keep fighting this losing battle. I was like, oh yeah, that makes total sense. Okay.
I love those guys, absolutely, and no, I agree with you. And there are a lot of parallels to those kinds of stories. So in Pulp, are we going to get back matter as well, or is it the story? I mean,
it's just a book cover to cover. No, there's no extra stuff in it. It's like Junkies. This one is it's like a few pages longer than Junkies. I barely fit everything in. Like I was telling Sean at one point, which is funny because we got delayed like a couple months. I never thought to go back and try to add another signature of stuff to it, but because I was so glad we hit the deadline, but we were like killing ourselves to make the deadline. And the day that we turned the book in and it was supposed to go to print with all the corrections and everything was the day that Diamond shut down. Wow. So we were literally about to set print and just go. And then it was like, oh, okay, now we're just in a holding pattern. So I was like, shit. Huh. And then every day it was like this creeping anxiety of like you went from feeling like everything was totally normal and so in a week they'll probably send the book to the printer, to then like 3 weeks later, like just total panic of like, oh my God, is this book ever going to print?
Yeah.
Like I know it's been like a complete seesaw. Anytime there's like any kind of good news day or any kind of art coming in from Marcos or Sean. Like Sean right now is drawing our extra story for the second Parker Martini edition.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, so I've been getting all these pages from him every day, and it's just like so uplifting, and it takes me away from like obsessively clicking on news stories or trying to find out whether or not it's safe to go outside with a mask or whether I should stay indoors and cry.
Yeah, I understand that. So wait a minute, let's talk about this new story. The Parker Martini edition, of course, Darwin Cook's wonderful adaptations of those wonderful Donald Westlake books and everything, and things like that became Point Blank. Oh God, what's the one with Mel Gibson? Payback,
yeah.
Yeah. So no, I love those. That's awesome. Tell me, what can you tell us about that story? How long is it? What are you guys doing?
It's a 17-page story. It was supposed to be like 10 or 12 pages, but I couldn't wrap it up in that amount of time.
Understood.
And I just figured, what the hell? I'll just make it as long as it needs to be. It was nerve-wracking actually, because Scott and I talked after Darwin passed away. I said, well, look, if you guys need any help with overseeing like the next Martini edition, because I knew they were talking about collecting those next two and doing another one. And we were going to do like some kind of a roundtable interview with Darwin. And so this stuff was being discussed. And Darwin and I, like in the year before he died, had actually talked a few times and emailed a little bit about trying to do a new project together. And I had just started on Westworld, so I didn't have time to really do anything. And then obviously he got sick, and I didn't know. We weren't in that close of contact. So it was like after he died, I didn't know what to do. I'm not good with like processing grief that well. Like I usually end up using it somehow as like fuel for my writing, I guess, because that's the kind of self-centered jerk I am. But I think writers do that. You just like take your, it's like your therapy or something. And so like I didn't know how to like pay tribute to him at the time, and I was so overwhelmed by this sudden loss that it took a little while to process. But I reached out to Scott early on, and I said, look, if you need help, like with Sean and I can help design the book, or whatever you need. If you need someone to help promote it, to get the word out there, which will help raise money for Darwin's widow, like whatever we can do to sort of just help raise the profile on this a little bit now. We're more than happy to do. Just I feel like it's the least I can do for Darwin, who was had such a big impact on my career, and as a friend, like I feel like always steered me towards what I wanted to do. So we started talking about that not long after he passed away, and then last year we sat down to start try to figure out what it would be and when it would be. And I think Scott's getting like a ton of extra art from Marcia for for the back section, like just different stuff that Darwin had done that was in progress.
Wow.
But yeah, then Scott asked if we would do a story for it, like Darwin had done for the previous one. And Darwin had adapted like a chapter, I think, from another book. Like he did for the Man with the Getaway Face. I think he just did like one section of that, and then he did. I think he did The Sixth or something like that. He just did that as like a short story. He adapted part of it. And so he asked if we wanted to do that. And then I was like, well, yeah, let me look through and see if there's some section of one of the Stark novels. I said I felt weird about doing a Parker story. Like I didn't necessarily feel right doing Parker. Like I felt like Westlake and Darwin, were like for me, it just felt weird just doing that. Like they had both died recently.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
It was on my mind. So I suggested that maybe I should look at like the Grofield books and try to find like a Grofield story. And then Scott suggested that he try to get permission from Abby Westlake, Donald Westlake's widow, to do an original story instead.
Wow.
And so he asked her about that, and she wanted to read the story before she approved it because no one else besides Donald Westlake, other than like screenwriters for movies that, almost all of which he's not called Parker.
Right.
And the one he is called Parker in is one of the worst Parker movies.
The Jason Statham movie, a massive disappointment.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Completely wrong from the jump. But yeah, so, knowing that I had to write the whole story and that, Donald Westlake's widow was going to be the person reading it and deciding whether or not it was okay to publish, I was like, wow, shit. Like, and I didn't realize until I was writing it, like how much of what I do, either consciously or subconsciously, I think when I started writing third person stuff, maybe it's just my writing style is very similar to his, or I just read so many Parker books early on before I started writing criminal that, it wasn't that hard to sort of try to take my voice and make it feel a little bit more like a Richard Stark voice. And this is fun. It's actually one of my favorite things that I've ever written. And she really liked it and approved it. So
that's awesome.
So yeah, it's a 17-page Grofield story, and I don't want to say anything more about it, but I want to tease the art I'm getting from Sean, but I have no idea. I think the book is coming out in like November, December, or something at the earliest. But yeah, it's beautiful, and Sean's coloring it like in the 2-color style, like what Darwin did.
Sure.
It looks just gorgeous, and then I think I'm writing something for the book, and I think Scott and I and maybe a few other people are doing like some sort of a roundtable interview where we talk about Darwin and his career and stuff.
I'm shaking my head, man. This is so great, and I've got the biggest smile on my face because Darwin and I never got to do a podcast interview. He did a couple with iFanboy, and they're terrific. And I absolutely encourage people to listen to those. And those guys got really close to Darwin. I would have your typical, after the hours at a con and time at his table and stuff. And they were always terrific conversations. And he was, so yeah, I always appreciated talking to him. And really, I'm thrilled. This is outstanding. I wasn't expecting that, and it's great to hear that there's going to be this other Martini edition. It's in good hands, and also, for people who don't know, Marcia is Darwin's widow, and Scott is Scott Dunbier. I'm assuming it.
Yeah, Scott Dunbier. Yeah. Scott was the editor who was not the first editor who put Sean and I together because we were working on a thing for DC Gotham Central for Mike Carlin, but when we started working together as a real team. Was on Sleeper, which Scott was our editor for.
Yep.
So that was like, I always feel like those people who have faith in you early on, I'm always really loyal to. And, like Scott and Shelley, Roberg, Bond.
I didn't realize Shelley was. Oh man, I'm going to be talking to her soon. I'm going to have to bug her about those years, man. Absolutely.
Oh yeah, I know Shelley's a big reason I have a career at all, because when I gave up on pitching stuff to Vertigo at some point because I was just getting tired of the rejections, and Shelley just decided that it was her mission in life to get one of my projects approved because she was, you know, sort of a big advocate of mine, and so she just kept pushing me when I was trying to quit. And then I pitched Scene of the Crime to sort of try to get rid of her because I was like, they're never going to go for a crime thing. And then they got like approved like 3 days later, and I was like, shit, now I got to write this. And I think a lot of my career came from that. Like, it was such a learning experience from going from doing my own comics to writing the odd story for someone else to draw to suddenly doing like a whole graphic novels length thing, and, you know, really having to like hit deadlines and work with other artists, you know, and all that. It was a big learning experience.
Was Scene of the Crime Lark, or was it Sean?
It was Lark, and then Sean came on with issue 2 as an inker because Michael was unhappy with his own inking. He didn't think it was loose enough. So that was when Sean first started working on any of our stuff. And then Sean, during that period, I think got hired to write or to draw Gotham Central, which I had just written not knowing who was going to draw it.
Funny. Oh my God. And look at where he led you guys. That's amazing. And seriously, man, I was telling you,
Dave Stewart colored it too, which is funny. Like I forgot that Dave actually was our first colorist, and when he was coloring Fatale again, for when he colored Fatale, I was emailing back and forth, and then I suddenly remembered, like, oh shit, Dave was our first colorist. We've come full circle. and then he misunderstood me on the scheduling and thought that we were only going to do 10 issues. Unbelievable. I meant 10 issues a year. we lost Dave as our colorist, and but yeah, it's been a long, strange trip with me and Sean, I gotta say. I think about that all the time now because the last 2 months I've just been literally at some point every day I've been trying to think, okay, well, what is the future for me and Sean? Like, do we become people who just do graphic novels? Do we, like, I had an idea for a monthly comic that about a month ago I just realized, like, I don't want to write this right now. Like, it was too much reacting to, I don't know. It was reacting to a bunch of stuff I'd recently written in my own way I felt at the time. And I thought, okay, this will be a fun thing for me and Sean to do. I don't want to talk about what it is because I do want to do it at some point.
Okay.
But like once everything hit with the lockdown and everything, and I just sort of felt like, all right, well, I don't know. Obviously, we're not going to be launching a new monthly comic in August because there is no monthly comics coming out. So I was like, shit, do I have an idea for something else? Is there a graphic novel? Can we serialize some short stories and put out a collection of short stories after the pandemic is over? Like, what is our plan? And I just sat there and I looked at my notebook filled with notes on this other project that I want to do. And I was just like, this just feels like the wrong thing right now. Like suddenly, like I was really excited about it up until 2 months ago, and I was just like, all right, this is going to be fun. It's going to be different than anything we've done before, but sort of similar. But, you know, it was going to have a little bit of a fantasy element here and there. And I just, something about it just didn't feel right. Like I just was like, I want to be excited about whatever we're doing, like while I'm doing it, because I feel like if I'm not excited about it, then no one who's reading it is going to be excited about it.
Totally.
And so I just kind of racked my brains. I came up with 2 different ideas that I really liked a lot that I wanted to do. And both of them sort of things that I'd noodled on before that just looked like, oh, we could maybe do this in like 120 pages as a graphic novel if we had to. And then just last week, I finally figured out what we're going to do. And I was like, all right, great. Now it's just like figuring out how we're going to do it. It's like, are we going to do it through Image? Is Image going to come out the other side of this, being able to, you know, be what they were before for us? Or are we going to have to, you know, try to find a new plan? Are we going to be on fucking Indiegogo? Like,
Sure.
All other people are going to be like, are we going to be on Patreon? Like, what are we going to do? Like, I'm not 100% sure on that part yet. I'm about a month away from having to make that decision of how we're going to work on our next project. I'm hoping that we'll just be back to normal at Image and everything will be fine. But, it's all dependent on, how things shake out over the next month or so, probably, for this industry. And it's hopeful if Diamond can really be getting stuff to stores in May, maybe we won't lose quite as many stores as everyone thought we were going to lose. I think a lot of people I talked to in the last month thought we'd end up losing half or more of the market if we were lucky.
Yes. Yeah, I've heard that. I've had those same conversations with guys like Rob Salkowitz, a really good, I think, business analyst for the geek industry. And he always posts stuff at Forbes and also at ICV too. Well, that's why I wonder, Ed, in terms of this panel syndicate experiment that you're doing right now and the success, I mean, do you think maybe digital first? And, and again, Marcos has his own thing. I don't know, is it only his stuff, obviously, over there? Or, I mean, do other creators use his imprint? They've had 5 or 6 different books, usually written and drawn by the same person. Like they did that book Umami last year. They have amazing stuff there, actually. It's all like done by the artists, and then I think they coordinate with Panel Syndicate as to whether Panel Syndicate wants the project, basically. Sure. And I think once Marcos and Brian approve the thing, you just sort of, you publish through Panel Syndicate, and all the money from the PayPal thing goes directly to the creators. So it's a really good system for just connecting creators to readers, basically. Mm-hmm. And that's really interesting. Marcus set it up because he just wanted to do something completely different that was his own. And but I've had a lot of people contacting me about it. I've tried to suggest that people bring their stuff over there, because I think it's 2 points. It's like a really great platform. It's really simple to use, as opposed to a lot of digital comics things that you go look at that seem a little too complicated. This is literally, you just look at it and you click the thing that says how much you want to pay, and you choose either zero or some money. And, everyone in the world who buys anything digitally has PayPal at this point, so it's super easy. Yeah.
It's got a built-in, audience of readers who've been going there for, 8 years, checking out what they've got. And so, that's great. And it's simple, it's there. But also, like, you make as much or more money, like, selling the stuff digitally first as you would on the print stuff. And when there is no print right now, and you're wondering, like, oh, how am I going to pay rent next month? It's like, well, we published this thing not long after it was finished. You could probably finish a comic and publish it the next day and start getting paid. You make the most money in the first 3 or 4 days after you put the thing up, actually. So it's like, on just the sheer level of efficiency of it, I was stunned at how quick the turnaround was and how great the response from people was. I think the biggest hurdle is just, guys like me who are just like, I'll wait for the book,
Sure. No, I get it.
I'm that guy for most digital comics. I'd be like, you're going to put a book out. I did that with the Private Eye. I remember writing to Marcos and Brian when Chapter 1 came out. I'm like, is this going to be a book someday? And they were both like, no. And I was like, all right, I have to read it. But, it's what's interesting, though, is I realize how often I do read things digitally on my computer screen, because I'm always looking at my friends' PDFs of their comics, or whatever comics get sent around that people are looking for blurbs on, mm-hmm. or my own stuff. When I'm proofing it, I'm reading so much of it digitally. And I was literally I don't have an iPad because I like print too much, and I look at screens all day. Like, I'm looking at a screen right now, we're talking. But like I borrowed my wife's iPad. I like downloaded the first issue of Friday onto my wife's iPad so I could just sit there and look at it the way other people would be looking at it. And I was blown away by how much I was going back and forth and just staring at the art. And it was a real fun experience. And I thought, you know what? Like if there were more stuff like this, like other people doing these things, like I would probably be more into reading digital comics, because I was excited about the whole experience of it, like trying to take myself out of it as the creator of the thing or co-creator of the thing, of just like, it was an easy experience. Like you click the thing, you look at the downloads, you choose which one you want. It was like, Jesus, this is the simplest thing in the entire world. And then I felt like I know how I am about everything. Marcos is even more like overly obsessive about every single aspect of every page and the design and like every single thing. Like I thought, well, the single page version, which, because they've always done, this is the first comic they've ever done that hasn't only been released widescreen.
Okay, yeah.
That's why Friday you can get either a computer version, which is 2 pages next to each other, which has the double page spreads. Obviously, there's like 3 double page spreads.
Yep.
But the double page spreads are all things that have very little text on them, so they look good just sideways on a regular iPad anyway. Mm-hmm. So you could get it either a double page spread or you could get the single page version, and that was really something that we went back and forth on a lot, and I was really like, let's just offer it in both versions. It'll be easy for us to do, and then then it's another thing that the readers can choose. Like, do you want to read it on your iPad, or do you want to read it on your laptop, or do you want to read it,
right.
It's up to you. And but yeah, I was just like, okay, this is fun. And he went back and forth over like the detail of like the cover, like the wraparound version of the cover is perfect. But like you'll notice the single page version, like you get the back cover where the back cover would be on a comic. I was like, this is so great. And even like the typesetting, like we went back and forth. He cares about every single detail in a way that is just, it's amazing to me, but it also always blows me away. I got like an email from him earlier today where he was taking this like these 3 spreads in chapter 2, which I thought were going to be kind of complicated, and I tried to make the easiest version of them possible. I don't want to ruin what it is, but he wrote me this way he wants to try to do it, which is making it even more complicated. And I was like, I love this guy.
Cool. That's great.
If he pulls off what he's trying to do, it's going to look amazing, but I would have never suggested that because it would have blown his head off.
That's awesome, man. Exactly. And that's what you want in a collaborator that wants to put as much effort in as you're obviously putting in, perhaps more. Again, he's carrying the load, the visual load and everything. And it's so atmospheric. It really envelops you into the story. And also, isn't it ironic that it's coming out now when weather is getting warm, but we're all in the lockdown. And it really does give you that isolation and wintry feel. It really does kind of fit, sadly, for this moment right now too.
Yeah, it's really strange. Even just like that last page at the end where she's just sitting there on her luggage smoking a cigarette, like that page is one of my favorite pages ever, and it's just so simple. It's just her body language says so much about this whole like that way that you feel the first night after you've come home from college, that for Christmas, and you're just like, oh, God, why am I here?
So when does Chapter 2 come out?
As soon as he's done with it.
Okay.
Hopefully, I'm hoping that they come out close to a month-ish after, the previous one. There's no schedule because, everything changes from week to week about how it's going to be. But Marcos is working pretty fast, actually, especially, I remember right before we published the first one, I was like, it's not going to be like 5 months before the next one, right? You took a long time figuring out a lot of stuff for chapter 1. And he's like, no. So, but yeah, hopefully a month-ish between, we're a couple weeks out. So probably a month from now-ish at the earliest.
Okay.
But one of the great things about Panel Syndicate 2, though, is that every single person who gets the first one, like when the next one comes out, they get an email letting them know the next one is out, which is that's one of the biggest issues with serialized comics in general, is like getting the word out when your comic is coming out. And you would believe a lot of the emails I get from Criminal or any of the comics Sean and I do, I would probably say like 20% of the emails we get are from people wondering if we know of another way to find our comic because their store always sells out on Wednesday and they always miss it.
I'm nodding right now, Ed. I get it. Absolutely. It's happened to me in Chicago. I mean, Chicago, for Christ's sake. Yeah.
No, and it's like, and I don't fault retailers for only ordering enough to sell that week. Like that's what they should be. But I would love it if they had enough to get through Sunday, or maybe have a couple on the rack for like people who come in twice a month instead. But this is why we encourage all of our readers to do pull lists and stuff, because I want to make sure they never miss our books. And like when the Junkies hardback was coming out, like almost 2 years ago now, I did like big outreach to comic stores to basically just say, look, you guys, we've been doing this for like 15 years now, and you guys have helped us build this really stable readership. And now we have a book coming out that, normally it would be $3 or $4 or something for our new thing for your readership. This one is a much more expensive item, but that, which customers you have that are like big fans of ours who are going to want it anyway. So make sure I was just basically like, what can I do to help you so that you can order enough? Because usually on like a $18 hardback or $17 hardback, most retailers are going to at most order like 3 copies. And if you're selling 20 copies of our book the week it comes out and you only get 3 copies of our hardback, you're going to have 17 unhappy customers who more than likely are going to go either to another store or online or whatever, because they're not going to want to wait 2 weeks for a reorder.
Yep.
So we did these book plates that I signed like 3,500 copies of, and we did as much as we could to sort of just encourage retailers to just like have as many on stock for that first week as possible, because that's when you're going to sell the most. And they really, to retailers' credits, they really came up. Like the orders went from initial to FOC practically doubled, and I think we sold out of that print run. I think we were down to just a few hundred copies within a week. Like, wow. So it was pretty crazy, like the response to that book. And I was like, all right, so this sort of proves to me that our readership, when we put out books, like, I feel like also a lot of our readers wait for hardbacks too. So going straight to like a expensive hardback was maybe like a safer move than I thought it was at the time. At the time, I thought, all right, well, this might be the lowest selling thing we ever did. And it was actually, it did really well for us. And, now we've got the paperback edition out, which will be how we keep it in print. So
cool. And God, you had all the awards, obviously, and also mentioning for trade waiters, good news this summer, Cruel Summer coming out, and Bad Weekend, 2 of the criminal arcs.
Bad Weekend came out last summer.
I read it wrong. Please go on. I'm sorry.
Cruel Summer is, I'm guessing Cruel Summer now will be August. If Pulp is coming out in July, because that was coming out a month after Pulp initially, so everything's shifting back.
Okay.
Hardbacks are shifting a little bit further back because they take an extra month for Diamond to process them.
Understood. Okay.
I did not know that, because I thought they took the exact same of time to print and process. Like, we found out on Junkies when we were like maybe halfway through the book, and we got like an email like wondering how soon we were going to be done. And we were like, what?
So what can you tell us about TV stuff? As you say, you've been working on some legendary stuff here and there, and I don't know how much you can talk about anything coming down the pipe.
Can't really say anything. Everything is kind of in various stages of progress. Nothing, no officially announceable news. They've optioned 3 different books, and I'm working in various stages on all of those, either as like a sort of consulting executive producer where I'm helping other people, or like with one of the projects that we're doing, I'm like hands-on, like running it, and I wrote the pilot and like series Bible and all that stuff. But yeah, we hopefully in the next month there'll be some official news about some of this stuff, because even in the shutdown, the nice part of being a writer is I already mostly worked at home to begin with, but in Hollywood, like everybody's been really freaked out about the idea that there might be a writer's strike, which
yes,
got pushed back a bit. So there's been a little bit of a frenzy of like everybody trying to make sure they had projects that were and like banking scripts, or if they'd bought a show, trying to make sure that everybody writes all the episodes for the whole season before the strike happens, so they can make the show during the strike if they need to. So even though there's a lot of everybody working from home, and a lot of production people are getting furloughed and stuff, on the development side, for a lot of stuff continues to move forward. Like for TV stuff, at least, there's still a lot of places that are buying new shows still, because they're these digital platforms that have been building up really need to continue to have content, so they're looking at this as like, okay, well, this is another chance to bank more stuff.
Understood. And absolutely, my friend Julianne Emery, who's guest starring for the season on Bosch on Amazon Prime, she's pitching stuff too. Man, she's another go-getter creative that like was doing an online internet video show in the early days of YouTube, when you can only put 9 minutes up at a time, and really made 2 seasons of a very funny comedy on her own. And, while she was acting in other people's shows and stuff. So it was funny. She was telling me the same thing in terms of, we spoke between Zoom development pitches she had that day. And she's out there doing it too. Absolutely, man. No, it is a fascinating time. And God, I just talked to Rick Remender, and I know he's got his adaptation of Last Days of American Crime is going to be on Netflix in June. And Ruck has got Ruck has got The Old Guard coming up on Netflix, and then also Stumptown. Have you had a chance to talk to Greg about like his experience and stuff in the Buzzsaw?
No, not really. I was trying to run into him at Comic-Con, actually. We've emailed a bit.
Sure.
I was I'm especially happy for Greg having just like thing after thing after thing. I remember last year just starting to get annoyed. I was like, Jesus Christ, can Greg get another show greenlit? Fuck, man. I actually really like Stumptown too. It's like a super fun show. It's exactly like the right kind of week to week like private eye thing that has been missing from the TV world for 20 years now. Because remember, like in the 70s, that was like every show.
Good Lord, yes. Universal. Columbo. Banachek, good Lord, that I love that Lookwell pilot that Adam West made with Conan O'Brien and Rob Smigel, where weren't you Banachek? No, I was McBannon or whatever. It's just like they all pretty much had the same name. They all pretty much had the same formula, whether it was William Conrad, Fat Cannon, or Columbo, and again, a Banachek, all those great shows, man.
Remember McLeod, where he's like riding the horse down the streets of Minneapolis or something? It's like really weird time in TV. Macmillan and Wife, I remember like, was it Rock Hudson? I feel like it was Rock Hudson.
And Susan St. James, who was like 30 years younger than him.
Yeah, exactly. But I remember it being like this thing my parents really looked forward to every time, because they didn't make that many of them. It was like, and the Columbo was only on like 3 or 4 times a year.
Right.
So yeah, it was like an interesting time where almost every drama on TV was about some person getting into trouble and solving other people's problems for them. And, and then over the last, 20 years, like cop shows and crime shows and medical shows have taken over all of that spotlight. It's like Chicago everything. I guess you could have gotten Chicago Private Eyes on maybe. But when Stumptown came out, and I was like, I watched the pilot, and I was like, this is really fun. And then I was like, holy shit, it's Rockford. It's like he's doing Rockford, but it's like the modern Portland version. So it's funny because then people don't think of Portland as like a city that would be filled with crime.
Totally. No, you're right about that, and everything about it, and also Kobe Smulders is so good, and I'm so glad that she's the right fit for that show too. You know?
She's totally great in that. Yeah, I was really like. Mark Andreyko was like hosting some panel of theirs at Comic-Con, and he's like, "Oh, come hang out. I'll bring you back into the green room." And then I showed up, and I was like texting him, I'm like, "All right, I'm out here. Where's this green room?" And he texts back, he's like, "Sorry, we're prepping for the thing. I'll talk to you later." Like, you fucker. Go back and Kobe Smulders and say hi to Greg.
Yeah, no, I get it, man. That's awesome. Jesus, I'm shrugging. What can you do? That's hilarious, man. And people during the binge, or they're in their binge mode, should probably go. We talked about it a bit in our last conversation last year, but Too Old to Die Young, the thing that you made for Amazon. Well, it's there and everything.
Yeah, that's true. It's like if you need to go to sleep while you're binging. The pacing is very unbingeable. Let me just say. So I do have a couple friends who've watched the entire series more than one time and are super obsessed with it. So that's been kind of fun.
I get it. Well, and again, Ed, I mean, you kind of had the same kind of feeling last year. So I'm like, all right, maybe I'll get to it. But then I'm like, oh, something, especially right now, it's like, I got to try this thing, man. And again,
it's beautiful. It's so weird. Like a year later, I was thinking, every year that passes, I look back at it and I'm like, it's so weird that like Amazon took their name off of it. Like I don't think it has anything to do with me. Like it doesn't affect me at all. But it's just like there's nothing so edgy or weird in it that I think it was just like the amount of turnover that happened in that company while we were working on the show. Like by the time the show was coming out, they just didn't know what it even was, or they didn't want to be connected to it. They just was kind of like, well, we're putting it out, but whatever. And, that was really frustrating to me after spending years of my life working on a thing to just sort of have it like abandoned by the network.
Well, that's an old Hollywood story. I mean, certainly we've seen that at studios where regime changes happen and movies get orphaned essentially.
Yeah, I mean, there's great movies still right now sitting on shelves that, or look at what happened with Brian Helgeland with Payback. We talked about Payback earlier, the Mel Gibson movie, and originally that movie was taken away from him and George Miller was brought in to shoot an entire new third act that Mel Gibson had rewritten and overseen, and then brought in George Miller to unofficially, I think he's credited at all, but he shot the whole new last third of that movie where they go to like a wrestling thing and there's this whole other story.
So Payback, was it more the vision of the original cut?
Years later, where I think Mel Gibson actually arranged for that version to get put out on DVD originally, like years later. I think I don't know whether he had a conversation with Helgeland about it or what the deal was, but eventually they just, they allowed Helgeland to go back in and re-edit it the way he wanted it to be and put all that, the whole third act is completely different.
Yeah. No, and again, it's really
different.
What's that? Say it again.
The ending is totally different. Like you don't know whether he's going to live or die at the end. It's really really fascinating, which ties in kind of to the book because in the original first The Hunter manuscript, when he turned it in, Parker got shot on the last page and died, I think, and then his editor was like, this could be a good series character, don't kill him. And so that's why in the last scene in the book, Parker gets shot, but the bullet just goes through his jacket. And so when he's sitting in the taxi, he realizes there's a bullet hole in his coat that he just almost got killed.
Yep. I'm nodding, man. That's awesome. That's fantastic. I bought The Hunter at City Lights in San Francisco. You'll appreciate that being a Bay guy.
Oh, yeah.
I was like, that seemed like the appropriate bookstore to finally buy that book and everything. Yeah. So, yeah. God, man, that's awesome. Well, honestly, we've had a wonderful conversation. Is there anything that we haven't covered that we normally do? What are you watching? Do you have time to watch, or are you really hunkering down and getting shit done?
Honestly, it's been a little bit hard to work. I've worked when I've had to. There's been a couple of times where like Legendary needed some stuff right away, where I've had to spend 4 or 5 days just nose to the grindstone working, and then you kind of stick your head up on those days and you look around and you're like, oh yeah, we're in the middle of a pandemic.
Yeah.
And those, but it's on the days, like I would say I wrote about, I don't know, 10 or 20 pages this week on Friday, and the thing I'm working on for Sean. And I've spent probably the last 2 days noodling over the same couple pages and just driving myself crazy trying to land on a first name for a character. It's definitely been weird. I was like asked to do some sort of a Zoom meeting thing at one point, and I was like, I went and looked at myself in the mirror, and I realized I hadn't looked at myself in the mirror for like 5 days. I'm like, oh, definitely I'm doing audio for this, not like I haven't shaved in like a month or something. I look like a mountain man. Yeah, it's funny how, like, as someone who works at home normally, the weirdest thing for me is just that my wife is home a lot more. Like, usually she's out doing so. I get a lot done when she's not around, and so it's just kind of funny, like learning new schedules. I've gotten into a really weird sleep cycle where I fall asleep kind of early, and then I wake up at like 12:30 or 1, like wide awake, and then I just stay up until like 4 a.m. doing stuff, and then I just go back to sleep. And
I'm the same way, Ed.
Yeah, I used to think that was insomnia, but it's actually just a different sleep pattern that a lot of people actually used to do that in the old days before we worked like an 8-hour workday normally. People didn't stress out so much about having to get 8 solid hours of sleep. They would sleep, they would wake up, they would feel awake, they would get up, they would drink some tea and look at a book for a while, and then they would go back to sleep when they felt tired again.
Sure. It
was a completely normal way of life when we didn't live in an industrialized society. So yeah. But no, I'm watching, I'm there's days when, I look at the news too much, or I'm not able to distract myself enough with my work, where I just, get wrapped up in it. Like when you read articles about like food plants going, like shutting down, or when you go to the store and they have no water and you're like, wait, what's going on here? And you start that like anxiety building. Like those are the days when I'm really thankful that the entertainment market has shifted the way it has the last couple of years, where there is Netflix and Amazon and Disney Plus and Hulu, and all these places are dropping like these shows where you can just literally, like, we're gonna watch that new Hollywood show later, probably the Netflix one that's like the sort of alt version of Hollywood history.
Ooh, I have to see that. I don't know the title of it, but I'm intrigued.
Yeah, it's just Hollywood, it's called.
Oh, okay, cool. Oh, that's awesome to know. Absolutely.
Ryan Murphy show on Netflix, but it's like, it seems really different. It's like an alternate version of the 40s, where they were trying to, use diversity and like be like more upfront about, like the LGBTQ stuff. And so it seems like right up my alley, in that I've spent like a decade researching that era. But I also am like, oh, this is fascinating, because it's going to be like kind of a different take on it, as opposed to just yet another like Hollywood story that I will probably know all the stories from. Like the trailer for it though was funny, because part of the trailer is like, remember that story about the guy who worked at the gas station on like Sunset or whatever, who claimed to be like a gigolo? I love that. Yeah, Scotty, whatever his name is. That was fantastic. That guy who had sex with like men and women, and movie stars, and Rock Hudson supposedly, and like all
Tracy
sorts
and
of
Hepburn. Tracy and Hepburn being kind of a beard couple. Where really. Yeah.
All of that stuff, like, I don't know how much of that guy's story is real, but if you watch this trailer, clearly that idea of like a gas station where the gas station attendants are all these young, good-looking gigolos, and was like part of the inspiration for this show. And I was like, oh, this is fucking hilarious. Like, I'm like all in that. We've gone back, and I've actually been on the Criterion app, like constantly, the Criterion channel.
I'm nodding. Yep.
I'm watching all the Columbia noirs, and
yes,
just last night I started watching this. What is the name of that one? It's got like a really weird name. It's written by let me draw a blank right now. It's directed by Douglas Sirk and written by Sam Fuller. And it's
fantastic. Oh my God, great combination.
From 49, and it's like it's a black and white Douglas Sirk, so it doesn't have that, fully crazy Douglas Sirk look, but it does kinda. And it's really interesting to see a Sam Fuller thing not directed by Sam Fuller, because if anyone listening to this doesn't know Sam Fuller, David Lynch would not exist without Sam Fuller.
Attaboy. Yes, I did. I'm nodding.
Go watch like the first 10 minutes of Shot Corridor, and then go watch Eraserhead. Or there's like a whole sequence in Shot Corridor that he blatantly lifted for the insane asylum scene in Twin Peaks with the guy who thinks he's like a Confederate general. It's like the exact scene from Shot Corridor. But the way Fuller directed everything was the most arch sort of. People didn't talk normal in a Sam Fuller thing. People talk very over the top and kind of staccato sometimes. Like Pick Up on South Street, like the dialogue is almost like the Hudsucker Proxy or something. The way they did that version of everybody talking a little bit too fast. Listen, see, like. So he was. I always think of Sam Fuller as being such a stylized like filmmaker, because he wrote and directed, all of his movies he directed. He also wrote. Mm-hmm. But I don't think I'd ever seen a Sam Fuller movie directed by someone else. And here's Douglas Sirk, who's also like one of the most arch kind of stylized people. But this is early in both of their careers, and so neither of them are completely there yet. It was really fascinating to see. It's like if you go back and you listen to that first New Order song, which is really just the last Joy Division song. Like they haven't quite figured it out yet. They're somewhere in between Joy Division and New Order. The singer doesn't know what he's really saying or not, or what it means, as opposed to like Ian Curtis probably knew what he meant by all those words. But there's something brilliant about that moment of like transition too. So that's fascinating. And yeah, the Criterion thing is like they're putting up a ton of good stuff right now through this. And I watched the first 3 episodes of that Run show on HBO, the one that it's Vicky Jones and produced by Phoebe Waller-Bridge. Mm-hmm. I thought that was really like a lot of fun. It's a little tense at first, but then by like episode 3, I started thinking, oh, this is actually going in like a fun direction as opposed to just really tense romantic comedy.
Are you?
I was pissed about the pandemic, like just on a personal like joy level. I was so excited when the trailers for season 4 of Fargo came out that it was supposed to come out like 2 weeks ago originally, and that's like delayed indefinitely because they filmed the last few episodes, so they're not scheduling it. And I'm like, motherfuck, that looks so good. I was like, God damn it, pandemic.
I understand. You're killing me, but you're right about all this.
All this problem with the pandemic of all time. Like, everyone is losing their jobs. People are dying all over the world. And I'm just like, but I can't see the new Noah Hawley. But we all have those moments. It's like you veer back and forth between the panic of that, all of us just have no idea. Everything changes week to week. I saw, like, today's the day where in Georgia, it's apparently legal to now go get like a haircut, or like all this close contact stuff is now legal. And Georgia yesterday had their biggest one-day increase in cases of COVID-19 that they've had yet. And I'm like, holy shit. Like, we're going to be going back into this and we have no idea. We're going to, 2 months from now, we could be back in full-on lockdown, worse than ever for all you know. It's like, we could just be yo-yoing like this for the next year and a half until there's a vaccine for this thing that's effective, that can get to, the entire world.
Right.
It's really like, so yeah, I mean, even doing this interview is like a distraction from, as I go out to like look in the other room at the dog, like I see my wife has come back from the store. She's like in coveralls and a mask, and she's like taking stuff onto the back porch to just leave it there for a few days before it comes into the house. Yeah. It's like we've all completely changed our lives in such a quick amount of time too, that it's really jarring. So yeah, I've been really thankful for any of the new TV that's dropped during this, like all these streaming shows, even like movies that I probably wouldn't have gone out of my way to see, but they're dropping them early on streaming because they can't release them in theaters now. I'm like, yeah, fuck yes, I'll watch that. Yeah. And but what's funny is I find myself craving just like fun more than anything. It's like I don't want to watch a depressing documentary about something, or I don't want to watch a show that's a parable. Like I am the biggest David Simon fan in the world. I watched the first episode of The Plot Against America, and I just thought, I'll watch the rest of this season later.
Yeah.
I really need this kind of like anxiety and depression right this minute. Like I want like Jack Reacher books, and
right.
Like I've been like, I was thinking about rewatching the Lord of the Rings movies, like the extended versions, just because I'll go to Middle Earth, and I was like, but that 2/3 of that is so depressing.
Yes, indeed, big slog. Two Towers, big slog. Absolutely, man.
They do win in the end, but then they have that sort of sad ending after they win. So
yes, yeah.
I was like, man, give me like the Arnold Schwarzenegger Conan movie. like that's literally where my brain is at right now. Like I'm, I was like picking up books to look at the other day, and like all the stuff that I have that seems like more pretentious or arty, I'm like, yeah, but how much of this is going to be about how depressing life is? And life is so depressing right now. Like I literally just want to read a Travis McGee novel.
God bless you, son. Absolutely. John McDonald. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And also, well, it's funny because I literally, and I don't know if this is your speed, but Jeff Johns and I reconnected last week, and he sent me the first 5 episodes of Stargirl, the new CW show, and it's a happy show. And yeah, there's conflict and there's conspiracy, but it's like, this is exactly what people need. So I totally get what you're saying, and this is how I felt about after 9/11 and the immediate period of 9/11, where it's like, nah, I just need light shit right now. Give me escapism, give me fun, and so
it's interesting too, because I remember after that thinking as a writer, like, is this because the world changed completely at that point, where suddenly everything was about terror. I mean, 24, like
yes.
For a while was related to terrorism and I remember at one point thinking, am I going to have to write like a crime story about terrorism, like to feel at all relevant to the world around me right now? And I never did that actually, but I remember thinking, is this something I need to research? Because Greg was doing stuff about that stuff before, that like 9/11 happened.
Yeah,
like,
Queen and Country and everything. Sure.
A ton of research on that stuff. Yeah. And, but I just remember thinking about it, like when these moments happen that change the world, like as a writer, you feel inspired to sort of react to that on some level, because then anything you're writing is always reacting to something. But this time I noticed, like, one of the ideas that I had was sort of loosely inspired by the fact that we're all in some phase of, we're not in official quarantine right now. We're all just having to stay home. People are still jogging by my house all the time.
Oh, yeah.
It's just like there's just not as many people out.
Right.
But I still don't feel like in some places you go somewhere and you're like, oh, half the people here don't take this seriously at all. But like one of the ideas I had was something that I felt like was almost too reacting to the world around us right now. And I just thought, I looked at it and I thought, is that just going to be super depressing to write? And then if I feel that way about writing it, is it going to be sad for Sean to draw? Or is he going to be like, this isn't exactly what we should be doing right now? And, and then are people going to respond to that? Like one of the things I've loved about the reaction to Friday is how many people wrote in to thank us for giving them a half an hour to think about something else.
Absolutely.
And that's when I was just like, I looked at like what I've been craving, and I'm like reading, I'm reading the Continental Ops stories. I'm reading Reacher books. I'm like, ordering Travis McGee novels. And I'm just like, shit, maybe I need to just do some kind of fun, in your face, like pulp thing, because pulp, while being, you know, a pulp story, is also kind of a serious story about a guy looking back on his entire life. He just used to be an outlaw, and, you know, he survived the Great Depression. So, and, you know, and it's at a point where, you know, there's American Nazis like rallying. And so I think it's still a fun story. Everyone who's read it so far really loves it. Kirkman told me it was the best thing I've ever done, which made me even more depressed that it was just stuck at the printer. I was like, God damn it! But yeah, then I just was like thinking about it, and I just thought, like, because I almost never just go for that, where it's like, you know, an Indiana Jonesy kind of thing, even, where, because I love stuff like that, but I always feel like when I get down to doing stuff that's like that, even my Captain America run, which, you know, arguably has some fun in it, is probably one of the more depressing runs of Captain America. You know? Like my Daredevil run, he's like in prison and then on the run, and his wife like commits murder. Like, I write some pretty bleak shit.
Yeah, but entertaining shit. I mean, and again, both of those runs are outstanding. And dude, and again, but you had fun. Like when the Punisher, my favorite part of the Daredevil in prison run is the Punisher shoots somebody in front of a cop, and it's like, you got to put me in, right? You know?
Yeah. He killed a pimp for slapping somebody. I remember the book was out and someone pointed out to me, it was like, so you had the Punisher just murder a guy in cold blood, and I was like, yeah, okay.
Yeah, that's the Punisher. That's okay. I mean, yeah. I mean, again, it's an ends to, or a means to an end. Absolutely, man.
Yeah. I do want to recommend a couple things to people who are at home, like feeling that sort of anxiety, and they want like some kind of crazy escape right now.
I was hoping so, man. Absolutely, please.
I've got like for me, a kind of an out of the box recommendation. I would think there's this really weird show on FX on Hulu, and maybe it's on regular FX too. It's called Dave, and it is about a white rapper who thinks that he's the greatest rapper in the entire world. And it starts out like the first episode, almost up until the end, you're just like, wow, this feels like a really tired joke. And then he raps at the end. And the first episode is directed by Nick Stoller.
Cool.
Directs a few of them. He's like exec producer. But when the guy raps at the end, you're like, oh, holy shit, this guy knows what the fuck he's doing. And it's almost like a Curb Your Enthusiasm style show. Like, it feels scripted but unscripted at the same time a little bit.
Okay.
But it really comes down to this main character is this really strangely, like, it's hard to describe who he even is. Like, his rap character is called Little Dicky, and his rap song is about having a small deformed penis. And somehow, like, the whole show just works because of the guy. And episode 10, which I wouldn't have been saying, go watch this, otherwise, but it's just a fun like show if you like, you know, like light comedies where occasionally someone raps amazingly and you'll be blown away every time he raps. You're like, holy shit, this guy's great. And the whole show is clearly built around that. Episode 10 is one of the most amazing things I've ever seen. The opening 10 minutes of it is a rap opera about him getting thrown in jail. And it plays like it's shot like a slow motion widescreen, like you're seeing all this terrible stuff happen to him, and he's rapping the whole story. So he's like explaining who what the different people are saying, and it's like Drunk History where you see their lips moving and you know. But it goes on for about 10 minutes to the point where, like, I don't want to ruin it for you. It is, you have to watch this episode, and. Right. It goes for like 10 minutes, and then it does something else for like 10 minutes, and then it just does one of the most amazing endings to bring it all back around. But, like, I can't even describe it. I was just watching this thing, and I thought, I don't know a single person who watches this show. It's so fucking intense and so weird. But, like, you know, the whole thing's up on Hulu now, so it's like, that's totally bingeable. Cool. I really loved Devs.
I'm hearing nothing but good things about that show. Yes, go on.
Yeah, they're really crazy. What's his name? Alex. I want to say Alex Garner, but that's not correct. Alex Garfield, the guy who did Ex Machina. But yeah, I thought I thought that show was really great, and that's like a 8-episode or 9-episode thing that's all out there. That is pretty bleak at times, but it's shot so interestingly that I just really loved it. My wife and I and some friends of ours have been having like a regular Saturday night movie club where we all start a movie at the exact same time and just text each other to make fun of the movie.
Hilarious.
And the best movie so far from that whole thing has been the classic Nicole Kidman movie, BMX Bandits, which is a movie from like 1981 or 84 or something. And
I'm assuming?
It's an Aussie movie,
Yeah.
I would say a good hour of it is the last part of the movie, which is just 3 kids on BMX bikes being chased all around like whatever city they're in. And every time there's like a close-up of Nicole Kidman about to do something, it then cuts to her body double, who is like a 28-year-old man with like a surfer. like so clearly a 28-year-old man who's super buff, and she's like a 16-year-old girl. It's super funny. But that's like the kind of watching I've been trying to do more of. And my wife has a Star Trek Voyager habit that she's had the entire time that I've known her. Anytime she's going through like a period of stress, she'll just start like have Voyager on in the background, or like Parks and Rec. She has like various comfort shows.
I understand. Deep Space Nine is one of my go-to, like if I just want to chill and not think. I throw that on and stuff. I'm a massive Star Trek fan. You guys, now you've opened a door here. Have you watched the new Star Trek stuff?
Yeah, we watch all of that stuff. Yeah, Picard and Discovery. I couldn't get her to watch season 2 of Discovery. I watched it though for some reason.
Well, I understand. Well, I like Anson Mount, but otherwise, I got my issues with Discovery and Picard. I got to be honest. I love Patrick Stewart. I'm happy to watch him take a shit, and you've got my attention. but that said,
not a good analogy for the show.
Exactly. Obviously, this isn't going in a great direction. But yeah, I just honestly, from a storytelling standpoint, I felt very let down.
You just knew the second that you saw the robot body being built that it was like, oh, that's how they're gonna, because Picard's dying, and I'm like, well, Picard's gonna become, an AI with Picard in it. It's like clearly that's where it was gonna go.
Sure.
It's hard to judge. I feel like, I did enjoy that. It was nice to see 7 of 9 and something.
Yes.
I was like watching that, and I was like, I would watch just a whole show about her.
Everybody's saying that, and I agree.
Doing like as like some crazy rebel in the future, like that was awesome.
Yep.
And I felt like that was a good evolution. But yeah, that's the good thing about like having grown up like a complete nerd. I gotta say, is like for times like this where there are the times where we're all trapped inside. There's a lot of like nostalgia stuff that we can all tap into that we grew up on that is very much like the escape mechanism,
Mm-hmm.
And all that stuff is just out there now. It's, it's available. We actually spent probably the first month of this. There's this crazy show on, I think it's called Dave TV. It's like a channel in the UK. The show called Taskmaster, where they get like British celebrities and they just make them do crazy stuff, and then they judge who did it best. Like literally, like you have 3 hours to recreate a scene from a video game. Go, and and like someone will recreate Mario Kart in the front yard of this house, and like it's hard to explain. You have to just look up Taskmaster on YouTube.
Okay.
They have like 5 or 6 seasons of it on YouTube, and it's all like comedians and like comic actors doing stuff. And it's like a trick show. Like if you've watched the show before you're on it, you realize that every task has like a trick in it somewhere, where you realize if you do it a different way, you can do it really easily. Like get someone else to, you're not allowed to touch this. It's like, well, it doesn't say the camera crew can't touch it.
Okay.
Like that. But it's just like really weird sort of, you don't think about anything. You're just like eating dinner and watching like, British people be forced to figure out how to like get a balloon to not float away.
I'm watching a ton of music documentaries. And like Yeah, I'm loving them. I mean, good Lord, I have
that Rush documentary that's on like Netflix or something last night, which I'm like not even a fan. But it's like almost any band that was ever big, I always kind of want to know their origin story. That's probably a comic book thing too, in a weird way. Like, I'm always interested in the origin of everything.
I can appreciate that. Ed, it was last year or 2 years ago. I can't remember, but I still haven't seen, and this is kind of a downer movie, but I'm curious if you saw it and your opinion of it, the Orson Welles Other Side of the Wind that finally came out.
I haven't watched it yet, actually. I watched the documentary about it.
So did I. No, I did too. And I really wanted, just like you were talking about your movie club, really, and of course at the time we could all get together. I have my buddies that are hardcore movie people, and I'm like, come on, we got to like set up a night and watch it together and talk about it and stuff. So maybe during the lockdown, but also it is, I know it's weird, and especially based on the documentary. Yeah, I don't know. But, and the other thing I was going to ask you regarding noir, have you done those noir cities with Eddie Muller and those guys?
Like the festival, you mean?
Yeah.
No, I'm never in the right place at the right time when they're doing it. Like when they were doing one in LA, it was like one of the times I was going to be out of town for something. Like I think I was in Europe at the time. But yeah, no, he's asked me a couple times to take part in those as like a guest or come be like a speaker before a movie or introduce one of my uncle's movies or something.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, Crossfire was one of your uncle's movies. What were the other movies that he did?
He's done a bunch. Yeah, he did Crossfire. He did his noir films. He did Crossfire. He did Murder My Sweet, which is one of the best Chandlers. And what did he did another one. I can't remember the name of it. That was like in between those two. That was also considered a noir. And then in the 50s, he did a bunch of movies in the 50s. He did The Wild One and On the Beach. And he wrote the first Ingrid Bergman movie, actually, that she was ever like a lead in.
Was that Intermezzo?
No, it's something called like, or maybe it was great. No, I think it's Ingrid Bergman. Yeah, I think it's called like The 13th Floor or something like that, or The 13th Floor Ledge. It's based on a true story about a guy standing on the ledge of a building and trying to be talked out of killing himself. Because that was the kind of thing people made movies about back then. Like, I think about that every time I'm watching like Criterion Channel and I'm watching like a 10-minute sequence and I'm just like, you could not do this now. Like, we watched that old George Romero movie Night Riders like a week or so ago, and it wasn't as funny as I thought it was going to be for making fun of. But the main thing I noticed about that movie is like you could easily edit an hour out of that movie and not lose anything.
Is that the bikers? Is that the bikers that do the night thing?
Yeah. It's the like cosplay bikers where it's like a traveling circus where they live as if they're in medieval times and they joust on motorcycles. Yeah. Like the first 10 minutes of it, I'm like, how is this not a show on FX? It's like a traveling carnival, so it's like a Ren Fair meets Sons of Anarchy.
Yes.
And they're all badass because they fucking joust and hit each other with like maces and stuff while they're on motorcycles. They're basically stuntmen. Like, they're way tougher than, you would expect any sort of biker gang to need to be. But they're all like these pretty boys too, and they're all like living chivalry. It's like really funny, but like I remembered that movie from when I was a kid, and I thought this will be a blast to watch. I remember Ed Harris is so serious in it and so pulls it off, and because this is like 6 months before he got cast in The Right Stuff, and then his B movie pass disappeared. But like he's still great in it and everything. There's no plot in that movie at all. Like there was like as I was watching it, I was like, so every scene is just like 10 times as long as it would be allowed to be today. And there's no bad guy. There's not even like a guy who's like in those old like B movies we grew up with. There's always like some guy who's trying to sell the arcade or the bowling alley or the roller rink. Some big business guy who's trying to come in and ruin. There's not even that. like it's just like 3 or 4 days of stuff that happens and then it's over and you're just kind of like, okay. Like I guess they could have done something more with that, but it was funny because like in my memory that was like one of the most exciting movies from that year, because I was like a 13-year-old kid when I saw that movie the first time, and it had like people riding around dressed as knights on motorcycles.
Totally. I remember watching that in college. I'm a couple of years older, and yeah, man, and it was a couple of years after the movie had come out because a buddy had it on VHS. And that was a movie we'd fire up and break out a doob and watch it. But I think you're right. Exactly. It probably is glacially slow to watch it.
I used to have a VHS tape that had that movie, which I recorded from like HBO or Showtime or something, and Fritz the Cat, and the Eddie Murphy Delirious.
That's awesome. That's fantastic.
On, like one VHS tape that was like 7 hours long or something, and that was like a frequently played tape. That and like Monty Python tapes got a lot of play back in high school. But yeah, it was just interesting to see like how slow paced it was, and then watching like, because noir films are not slow paced, but
they only were 70 minutes long or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. But you're watching these things, and I'm like, it's really interesting because I grew up going to like film fests and noir movies and stuff because of my uncle, but it must be really hard to get like people that are younger than like 40 to be interested in watching like old movies these days, because just on a sheer pacing level, they're getting something so different. Like, and have you been looking at Quibi at all? Or Quibi?
No, I'm certainly curious about how it's going to be. Reading the description of the shows, nothing really intrigued me. Have you watched it?
We've watched a couple of them. I actually kind of dig the shorter format for just like if you want to just watch something while you're eating a bowl of cereal or whatever. It's like, okay, because you don't get stuck there for 20 minutes watching the rest of something.
Sure.
But we watched the Flippers, I think it's called. It's like, or Flipped. Which is what's his name from MacGruber and Last Man on Earth? Will Forte. Yeah, Will Forte. It's a Will Forte and the woman from Always Sunny in Philadelphia are like played this couple who are like remodeling and flipping a house, and then it just becomes this huge comedy of errors. And that one was really good, and that one's like Funny or Die. So you could have seen it otherwise. And then we just watched the one like on and off over the last week, this one called Dummy, that's like Anna Kendrick and a sex doll.
Yep.
And then
I heard about that.
That one is created by Dan Harmon's wife, and the character called Dan Harmon in it, who it's about the time that she discovered that Dan Harmon had a sex doll. And but it goes completely crazy after that, where like the sex doll starts talking to her and stuff. And that one was really good, actually. I gotta say, I really enjoyed it in general. What I was interested about was just like the format of it, and like they did a thing which I guess got a lot of press about how you can, if you're watching it on your phone, you can like move your phone from widescreen to tall, and the camera just changes because they shot with two cameras at the same time. So so every scene is being shot with two cameras, so if you flip it, it is completely seamless. It doesn't just become it's like it goes to like a different camera completely, but it's pretty seamless how it happens. But I gotta say, after doing that 3 or 4 times, I thought, there's never a reason that I want a thing to be vertical instead of horizontal. Like, it was one of those things where, like, where there's those innovations every time some website or like Microsoft Word or whatever does like an update where they innovate something, and you look at it you use it like 3 times, and you're like, that was probably not worth the however many millions of dollars they spent on it, because it's the same thing when we talk about like books are pretty much the same as they've been for 1,000 years. And it's like there's a reason that however much longer human society lasts on Earth, there will just still be books. There will be that market. People will still want to read books. All the like younger people that are in my family, like teenagers, like nieces and nephews and stuff, they all read books. They don't even like iPads and Kindles and stuff like that. They're all into digital everything, but for reading a book or even a textbook or a comic book, they all want to look at it on paper. And
Understood.
Instinctively, they just know that you absorb a little bit more information and you lose yourself a little bit more in it when it's printed. I think it's just a more pleasurable experience, and maybe that's great. But to me, it just shows that it's like, yeah, people who bet against books are not thinking about like the past at all. It's like there's I mean, digital distribution and everything is great, and it's awesome to, but I feel like when people were like freaking out about digital killing books or killing, like even I had some friends who were like big novelists, like who write like airport novels and stuff.
Yeah.
Where those like 30 writers that exist who, sell 1 million books every time they put out like a thriller.
Sure, Dan Brown, Meltzer, people like that, yeah.
Exactly. And like one of the friends I had was talking when the digital thing really took off. I was like, so what do you think is going to happen? Is it going to affect your hardback sales or your paperback sales, or what's it going to be? And the thinking in the early days there was that digital sales would probably replace like the mass market paperback sales to some degree.
Yes.
A lot of that is people who are obviously not going to keep the book anyway. They just want to read it and then pass it on or donate it to the Goodwill or or the used bookstore or whatever. But I don't think that even happened with a lot of that. I think it's still a small percentage of all these markets, and it's like no one freaked out that audiobooks were going to kill books,
Right. Yes.
I definitely listen to audiobooks more than I read like a Kindle thing ever.
Okay.
So it's interesting, but it's not like usually if I have an audiobook, I also have the book, and it's because like if I get super into a book, like and then I have to drive like 5 hours to LA or San Francisco or whatever, I don't want to have to stop reading the book. So I'm just like, okay, what chapter am I at? And I just start it there on the road.
That's cool.
It's going to be if I'm reading really into a book and then I have meetings in Santa Monica and I'm going to be in the car for 3 hours that day going back and forth, like, oh, great. Well, I'll just be sucked into my book then. So
I'm with you. I'm curious. Go ahead. I'm sorry, buddy. Please.
No. What are you curious about?
Well, I want to know if you're into from a podcasting standpoint, these narrative storytelling podcasts like Katrina Longworth with You Must Remember This and
yeah. I listen to a ton of those. I probably have like 5 or 6 podcasts that are sort of my go-to podcasts, but I really liked some of the true crime ones that came out in the last years. There was one about a private eye trying to get like a kid out of jail. What was that one called? They put out the new one and they only did it on Spotify, and I was really mad.
So it wasn't Serial, obviously, and there's a million of them obviously out there. Right?
No, it wasn't Serial. It was hold on. I got the first episode of the new one. It's called Conviction.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Conviction, and they have a new one that's about like the satanic panic of like the late 80s, early 90s that I really wanted to listen to, but currently it's only available on Spotify.
Isn't that weird? Isn't that weird? Because again, as a podcaster that's been doing this for 15 years now, it's like be everywhere you possibly can. And I do understand that Spotify likely is throwing money at them to be an exclusive. Word Balloon's on Spotify. And honestly, it's been very interesting to read how the Spotify numbers have increased and stuff. And in the same way with Quibi, I appreciate the idea, but I'm like you said, it's kind of you were talking about the camera angles, but even the 10-minute show, it's like my buddy Julie. I mean, she was doing that back in 2009 because that was the limitation of YouTube. So it's and also
we did Angel of Death at Sony in 2009, and that was 8 to 10 minutes an episode.
Yeah, I remember talking about that.
And so I had like a meeting with the Quibi people like before when they were first building the whole thing. Like I had a meeting with Katzenberg at his coffee shop that he hangs out at.
Okay. Hilarious.
And he's like one of those. There's like this one coffee shop in Beverly Hills that like a ton of people just do business there all day.
We have one in Chicago. Lou Mitchell's is our like media nexus of business meetings. Go on.
Yeah, but I remember when sitting down with them about it, and I was just thinking. I remembered how frustrating like it was at the time to try to fit enough character stuff in into such like what had turned out to be like such a plot heavy story, an action heavy story. But then I remembered like, oh, the reason that was frustrating to me is because when Sony first greenlit Angel of Death, they were supposed to be 15 minutes an episode, and then they got cut back to like 8 to 10. So when they cut stuff, it was like they were cutting out like all the dialogue stuff that I loved.
Oh, man.
So it ended up feeling a little bit bare bones to me. But yeah, it was like I was thinking that at the time. I was like, didn't we all try this originally with YouTube? Like, why are we assuming everyone's gonna, want 10 minutes a day of some show? But it's designed for like commuters, and it's designed for people who have like that 10-minute break where they just want to sit in their car and drink a cup of coffee and look at something on their phone that's entertaining, and not because you go to YouTube, you have to search for 10 minutes to find what thing you want to watch now.
True.
So,
It's funny, Ed, we're mentioning Angel of Death. Some Zoe Bell fan, in fact, that was her YouTube moniker, took our interview that we did about Angel of Death, put it on YouTube. I'm totally fine with that because, again, I want people to see it. And I swear to you, Ed, it is my most watched YouTube video.
Okay.
And like over 30,000. And it's like, that's crazy and great.
On it or something? Or
Say it again, Ed. We couldn't hear
did they
you.
put a bunch of clips or like images of her doing stuff?
They had images of from the show. Yeah.
Kinda weird. All right, I feel like we barely talked about comics in this whole podcast. Are you
Bullshit.
Sure
Bullshit. No. We did great. And seriously, I'm happy to wrap up with you because
you're just 2 hours of us rambling.
No. No, we did great. And seriously, Ed, you know this from our previous conversations. The first half is let's talk about comics, let's talk about the new product, and really, really appreciate the list of reading and watching that you provide. And man, you're no different than Bendis and Fraction and Rucka and Kelly Sue, my guys, my peeps that I do go to. And it's like, what are you reading? What are you watching? People want to know. They want to know this stuff. So this has been great.
Yeah. Oh, good.
So, yeah, man. Hey, so we can wrap up. Hey, Friday, available through Panel Syndicate. First issue out now if you haven't picked up on it. A great new series from Ed and Marcos Martin. And Ed and Sean.
Whatever you want.
Yeah, pay whatever you want. Pay nothing. Which we'd prefer that you pay something because it's a good effort.
But, we'll survive.
No, and seriously, I'm so glad you're doing this. And, of course, Pulp coming out later this summer from you and Sean, and Cruel Summer, the collection, later as well, and other new things on the pipeline, man. I can't wait, and I'm glad we're talking. And please, when you announce the new thing or when it's ready, close enough to being ordered, I hope you'll come back and we'll do another talk.
Yeah. I mean, it's entirely likely that Sean and I will, the thing we're doing now will either appear as just a graphic novel later on this year, like November, December, or we'll serialize it digitally, and then release it as a graphic novel at the same later. Just depends on, what's feasible for, and what we need to do to keep having income come in. And I can't stress enough to anyone out there who's still listening. Like
they're still listening.
Because like everybody in every market and every business in the world that isn't the supermarket right now is like freaking out about whether or not they're still going to have a job like on the other end of this if they haven't lost their job already.
Yeah.
And like I can't stress enough, like it totally freaked me out. I freaked out so many people I know in comics to suddenly go from, you can be at the top of your field or, one of the more successful people and suddenly, to have the entire rug pulled out from under you where you don't know if you're even going to get paid for books that have already been sold that the distributor's already been paid for. To just think you could be, look at someone like Kieran Gillen, who's got like 2 of the best-selling indie books on the market right now with Die and Once and Future. And it's like to have something like that get just cut off. And it's like, oh, well, this is just how you make your living. And I don't think enough people have really even talked about like what the creators right now are like, the sort of anxiety and worries about how we're going to survive that creators have been going through, even successful creators like me and Sean. It's like I'm relieved that we've done well enough that I'm not as worried as I would be. But if we were only surviving on comic publishing right now, like literally, like we haven't been paid for months for anything. Wow. So if I was like a young creator just starting out in comics, like this is the kind of thing that's gonna like a lot of people who weren't as lucky as Sean or I or any of the bigger name people to do their own independent stuff, like this is gonna probably drive a lot of people back to just work for hire stuff where they don't have as big a stake, but they also can't lose as much, and a lot of people will probably just be driven out of the industry entirely because there won't be enough paying work for everybody, because they won't be publishing as many books, there won't be as many customers. It's like a really, really terrifying time. So to have something like Panel Syndicate where we can, publish stuff, like when I saw how well Marcos did, that first week, I was just like, oh God, people are really responding. This is great. And we're selling copies and, like it's been lifesaver on that level, just because it gives me hope that there is like a future where we can still get these books to people. The big hope is obviously comic stores come back and bookstores come back and things move back to some semblance of normal. But it's going to be a rough year, like I said earlier, and I really think I always want to call out to people. It's great we're all like doing auctions and raising money for stores, and I'm encouraging people to do special orders from your own stores and do curbside pickup. Like I've been doing that with the local bookstore. I've done that with a couple comic stores that I shop at, just like put in mail orders and stuff. Like I think we all need to do all that, but I worry about creators a lot because I think we're going to start seeing a lot of Indiegogos and a lot of Kickstarters and a lot of, I hope mostly it's, people trying to pre-sell their work and not just trying to raise money to pay their bills. But there's going to be a lot of that stuff. Yeah. I feel like there's still a disconnect. Like a lot of people don't know Image is different than Marvel and DC. They don't know that, how the creator-owned model works and that you mainly get paid off of your publishing. Well, you get paid off your publishing. So I feel like there's a little bit of a disconnect from people who support comics as a thing, not understanding how creators actually make a living and how scared a lot of creators are right now. And it's like we're scared for the stores that we love. We're scared that the distribution is, going to go under, which, like I think in some ways some good stuff might come out of this. Like probably more companies will not just only be distributed through Diamond, maybe. Yeah. That'll break a little bit. Maybe some publishers will diversify who distributes their books a little bit more. Maybe more people will start thinking about, maybe I should save some money in case this happens again in 6 months or a year or totally whatever. Like there's some good things that'll come out of this, but there's going to be a lot of pain. Like Warren Ellis said, it's going to be a painful time, and maybe there'll be some new evolution that comes out of this. Like maybe there will be like some kind of digital comics revolution where people are like deciding to get stuff out quicker and then concentrate on the print version being like a graphic novel or something, which a lot of stores would rather have a $15 or $20 book because they make a lot more profit on a single sale. Totally. So it's a really weird time. It was when I saw the announcement that Diamond was going to start distributing comics again in May, the totally selfish part of my brain was like, oh, thank God. And then it was immediately being fought by the pandemic freak out part of my brain that was like, wait, is that too soon? Yeah. Like, what's happening? Like, are we just going to end up like having a start and stop then, which is going to end up just as bad or worse? And, but the part of my brain that was hopeful was like, well, thank God, because I hope that a couple months, like most of the stores can weather that. Yeah. Because, ultimately, I hope another thing that comes out of this, though, is publishers learning to appreciate those direct market stores a little bit more. Amen. Because I cannot tell you the amount of executives who work for the big two publishers who I've heard basically like wish that the direct market would go away so that they could stop having to listen to them. Yep. And Like, what are you talking about? Like, I wouldn't even be in comics if I didn't like grow up going to comic book stores. When I was like a teenager, I was like drawing pictures of Wolverine at like 12 or 13 and bringing them into the comic store and showing them to the manager, and he was like hanging them on the wall there. And like,
oh, that's great.
That kind of support that led me to, you know, when I did my first mini comics, I'd print up like 5 copies and bring it to, you know, the local comic store, and they would sell them for 25 cents. And, you know, it was like
that's great.
That whole system. And every time I see someone ragging on the direct market and saying how inefficient it is or how it's all not standardized, and you know comics isn't a real business because no big chain ever tried to buy out all these stores. And it's like, thank God no big chain ever bought out all these stores, because every time a big chain takes over, you've got like 10 years and then that big chain shuts down and suddenly, oh, well, there's no independent bookstores anymore because of Borders or Barnes and Nobles because they drove them all out of business.
Yes.
And, you know, so thank God comic stores are these little fiefdoms run by people who really give a shit about comics, you know, because those are the kind of people that right now are trying to figure out how to make sure they can open their store again on the other side of this instead of just throwing in the towel. And, you know, it came at a time when I feel like comics was sort of bouncing back from a big like couple year long doldrums where nobody really gave a shit about what Marvel and DC were doing until Hickman's X-Men last year.
That's 100% right, sir. Absolutely.
But I think DC like had their last their like third relaunch in like 10 years, and people were sort of into that at first, and we're starting to lose steam on that. And then the Hickman X-Men thing started, and DC's getting ready for their next thing. And it felt like I'd go to the comic store. Whenever I was at the comic store on a Wednesday, I would see people come in specifically just to get the Hickman X-Men.
Yep. And
my retailer was like, yeah, that kind of stuff hasn't happened in a while. They were like, and those people then end up buying other comics. It's like the same thing. Like I want to get more people to put comics up on Panel Syndicate, because Marco showed me that like when people like however many like 50, 100,000 people came to look at the site the week Friday launched, like a bunch of them ended up buying a bunch of other books on Panel Syndicate that time too. So it's like all of that stuff really helps. But yeah, I think, you know, I hope that in the amount of like let's love and support comics that's out there, that people remember how many creators are being told right now, like, you know, what 2/3 of Marvel and DC books have been put on hold, and the people who work on them are furloughed. And, you know, if you work in comics for a living, it's an incredibly hard living to get to the point where you can make a living doing it. Mm-hmm. It's a hard field to break into. There's not a lot of people in it. And you kind of end up with not a lot of other skills. You know?
Yeah.
If you're a writer, you can move into like novels or TV writing kind of. But if you're a comic book colorist and letterer, that's pretty much your career. You can, you know, comic book colorist, you could probably do production art and stuff. You can do a lot of different things. You're an artist, but really, if you're a machine that's coloring 8 books a month, that's how you make your living, you know. And probably a lot of those people have been cut back to like 1 book a month, you know, which is like, that sucks.
Yeah. No, I agree, man. No, and really, go ahead. I'm sorry, Ed.
No, go ahead.
All I was gonna say is it's about community, and that's especially from the retailer standpoint, but also the creators. Before we were talking, I had a brief conversation with Joe Pruitt over at Aftershock, and ironically, and I'm glad to hear this, he reached out to a bunch of creators that have that pencils down situation, and he's like, hey, come over here, and he's planning a bunch of one-shots and going to experiment with like 40-page one-shots and stuff, and say, look, while you can't work over there, come on over, we'll pay you, we'll bank this stuff, and we'll put it out.
Yeah, there's people that, I mean, this is if you've got finances right now, it's a great time to try to get stuff done. I mean, I'm assuming when all the printing comes back up, especially like, I'm guessing the Chinese printing is going to be a little bit cheaper than it was.
Yeah, you know what, I was going to ask about that, because like for Pulp and last year's book was, are you using a domestic printer? Because I remember these talks, like when you do the super deluxe criminal, and it literally was on the proverbial slow boat from China.
The first criminal books were all printed in China. I think the Marvel ones. I think the plan for we're doing in the fall, we have the reprints, new editions of the Criminal Deluxe Volumes 1 and 2, and then coinciding with Volume 3 that same month. And we're printing all of those because the first two have been out of print for a while.
Okay.
And but Volume 3 is all new stuff from the last 5 years or 6 years of Criminal. And those are all, the plan has been to print them all in China, and it's like you just need it's like a 4-month turnaround time.
Yeah.
But the printing is a lot cheaper, and they have the best paper, and I'm just I have no idea. I know the Fractions November book was printed in China, and that book looks amazing. Our Pulp is being printed in America, I believe, somewhere. I can't remember the name. Or I think it's the same people who did the Junkies book, which might have been the first time they did a hardback for Image, but they did a great job on that. That's being printed in America, so there's only a couple months turnaround time on that.
Okay, cool. That's awesome. Dude, this has been amazing. And seriously, I really, it's been great.
I feel like
talking.
You're going to need to edit it down.
No. Part 1, part 2, Ed. Are you kidding me? No. I did it. Well, I did it with Matt. Matt and I did a live video stream last week. And Ed, I swear to you, because don't feel like, oh God, I've been blathering. No, people love this stuff. They will be so happy. And thankfully, when conventions finally do come back, or maybe you'll get feedback. And I love your newsletter, by the way. We haven't even mentioned that. And I love that's another way you're keeping community going and stuff. But seriously, I get these great stories from creators who are like, God, I can't tell you how many people at a convention would tell me how much they love the Word Balloon interview we did, because we get into this stuff and we talk about the things beyond the comics that you want to promote, what you're reading, what you're watching, and people love that stuff, man.
I just always fear, I love WTF, but every now and then Mark Maron gets a guest on where they go off on a tangent for half an hour about supplements. I worry, I'm like, man, did I just do 2 hours about supplements?
I promise you that, and it's a weird time, and it's great to kind of process all this together. And honestly, I know a lot of people are getting, again, because everyone thinks they might be dealing with sleep problems and other things by themselves, and it's no, this is part of this weird time. So it's great because I think it's decent entertainment, but also an understanding. Hey, we're literally all in this together, and we're all facing challenges that. I mean, God, even our grandparents were too old to. I mean, I wish my dad were around. He'd be in his 90s now, but he lived through the Depression, and a lot of his older brothers and sisters and stuff. I mean, it's a shame. I mean, and again, it's we need that kind of perspective right now,
Yeah, it is strange. It's all these things are such a great escape. I listened to one of my favorite podcasts is Reply All.
Okay.
You know that one? It's
please.
Oh, it's a really fun one. Sometimes they'll do some investigative ones. They have a 3-parter, I think, or a 2-parter that's about a private eye that's the world's greatest skip tracer, and it's this Mexican woman. She's Mexican American or a Mexican immigrant in America. But she's she can find anybody. That was really great. There was one that was about troll farms. Internet troll farming and how that's and how that actually works. That was one of the reasons I was oh, social media, I'm off of that forever. Never worry about anyone being mad at you on Twitter or rando people going after you on Twitter, because the 85% chance it's just random teenagers in another country who don't even know who you are, who are just being told to target you.
Interesting.
It's a really fascinating podcast. They'll do literally there was an episode recently where some guy remembered a song that was a hit song he heard on the radio in the 90s or early 2000s, and he couldn't remember the name of the song, and he couldn't find anyone else who remembered the song. So he tried to recreate the song, and they helped him recreate the song and played it for other people to try to, music critics, trying to find anybody who would remember what the song was, until they actually finally found it. And it turned out to be a really strange, I don't want to ruin it for you, but it's an amazing story, because as it's going on, you're starting to think, did this guy just dream a song and then convince people to record it? But like they do all these really insane things, and it's like people will just call them up and say, I've got this weird thing, and and then they'll end up doing like a whole episode or series of episodes about it. But like they started doing their like remote podcast versions where they're like just having readers call or listeners call in from around the world to tell them like what it's like during the pandemic where they are. And I've had a hard time listening to those because it's like, no, I want you guys to just be talking about bullshit and making fun of each other. Like, I know I'm living through it. It's like, it's great to hear about what it's like in Italy instead of here for like 5 minutes, but then please get to the weird Hammer horror movie section. So it's kind of funny. Like I on another level, and I think all creative people, anybody, like when I was putting out my last newsletter, trying to announce Friday and get people to go look at it.
Yeah.
I was like, it feels really stupid to be talking about comics right now, in the face of the fact that thousands of people are dying every day of this disease. This is, by the end of the year, it's going to be the number one cause of death for this year worldwide. Like right now, it's number 2. 2 weeks ago, it was number 3. It's up next to heart disease. I think it's going to pass heart disease.
Of course.
It's already passed cancer for most deaths this year, and so there's all this stuff, and here I am like, oh man, but the comics industry. And it's like, yeah, but that's everybody. That's like but whatever industry you're in, you're like, if you work in restaurants right now, you're wondering how the hell you're going to pay rent next month.
Absolutely, man.
And because those are jobs that are held by people who live paycheck. Most people live, some version of paycheck to paycheck. Yes. You're lucky to save 10% of your money, and so it's such a weird time that, just having these weird outlets, like listening to the new Stephen King book on, audio book, because I'm like, oh, I want to hear more about the, Holly Gibney from The Outsider. All these things are such an escape. And then you get like a podcast where they want to talk about, like, I've listened to Fresh Air less than I've ever listened to Fresh Air in my adult life now. Because, like, I don't want to hear about Trump. I don't want to hear about the pandemic. It's like, I just want you to talk to me about the record or the book or, whatever. It's like, tell me about the, the historical fiction.
I'm with you, man. No, and again, this is what I'm doing with Word Balloon and why I've been like doing, as opposed to 2 or 3 episodes a week, literally almost going every day to give people. And again, it's like, let's have fun conversations. God, you would have been great with Tom King and Mike Cronenberg from Noir City, and we were just talking about our favorite Columbos and how much we love Columbo and stuff.
Happily joined that. Yeah, I was actually going to ask if you ever do I would love to hear a podcast interview of Byrne and Claremont where you interview them about the early Marvel days. Like, I don't know that you could ever get the two of them to even do it, but I was
that's the rub. I think that would be the rub.
I know, could you get either of them, and it's like, if you could, how much could you get them to talk? But it would be amazing to hear like an interview with the two of them. It would be like that convention that had to just keep upping the money to get both Kirk and Spock to appear on the same stage. It was like, I don't know how much they ended up paying, but it was so much for a one-day appearance. Because they each wanted to get paid more than the other one, is what I heard.
Well, that's.
I would love to hear, because I've read those interviews back in the day of, each of them sort of trashing the other, but it would be great to hear them talking about that stuff now, because everyone I know who works in comics still goes back and looks at those Byrne, Claremont, Paul Smith,
God, yeah, that run was incredible. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's like so to lolook back at it now, I'm like, I want there to be more of stuff like that, like.
Well, that's funny, man, because I talked to Paul Kupperberg about some of his DC 80s stuff. I did how great. I mean, and I'm big on one-on-ones because I always feel like if we do a twofer, that especially sometimes the artist is going to get fucked because I think like a writer, being a broadcaster and a radio writer and stuff. But I had Liefeld on last. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Ed.
Oh, yeah. I was going to say there's a lot of comics artists, especially from the 60s and 70s era, or even 80s, who really got given an outline and had to do a lot of the storytelling. You know, John, I think, would argue that he was probably at least the co-writer of those X-Men.
Oh no, you're absolutely right. And I talked to Liefeld last week, and and so I got the '90s stories and stuff, and that's great because we hadn't had the opportunity to really do that. I mean, and that's the thing, and truly, that's what I am trying to do, reaching out to people. JMD Mateus and I just did an interview. We mostly talked about new animation, but back in the day, we'd always have talks about his previous runs. But also, no, you're right about artists. I mean, I had DC set up Grant Morrison and Liam Sharp for me, and I was able to kind of feel like, all right, I'm not leaving Liam out. We are talking about stuff. So no, that's my intent.
When you've got Grant Morrison and anyone else next to them,
yeah.
You kind of want to just ask one question and let Grant go.
For real. No, you're absolutely right, man. So no, I'm glad you're saying this because it reinforces my intent to reach out to older creators about past runs and really talk about old stuff and everything. So I'm going to do it.
That's one of the things I love about like writing podcast or interviews with writers on podcasts is when they start getting into the technical nitty gritty of it. Like I for years I wanted to just do like a blog almost where I would just interview other writers about like, what's your schedule? Like how do you find to write every day? Because it's different for every single person. Like how do you do it? Because if you're writing, you need to do it at least, a little bit every day. If you're not spending at least an hour every day working on your writing, you're not a writer, and you really need to be, even that includes like thinking about it or notebooking or whatever. But I always want to know, like, what is your schedule? Like, do you get up really early and go for a jog first? Like, what do you do? Like, do you work? Are you a Bendis where you start working at like 10 at night until like 5 in the morning or something? Are you Yukio Mishima where you write like naked with a cat on your lap from midnight until 6 in the morning by longhand? Like, I want to know.
I'm with you, man.
I would love there to be just a writing podcast that's just about the technical stuff.
Yeah, the process. No, I get it, man. And it's funny because I'm glad that listeners will hear process things and tell me, oh, I'm really glad you talked to so-and-so because they talked about that. Greg is always like, process, man. Let's talk more process. And I'm like, whatever you want, man. It's all good.
Yeah, I had people come up to me after that last one, about the Hollywood stuff and just say they had no idea how many rewrites that you'd have to do on like a TV episode or a pilot script or a movie. I was thinking about that earlier today, just how many movie projects, like how many times like some of my books have been optioned to be made into movies and had scripts written by other people. And it's like some of them it's been like over 10 years that someone's been trying to get a movie made of it or something. And it's just like, you're so excited that first like month or so, and and slowly over time you just stop believing it's ever going to happen. It's just like to the point now of someone now I've got the Legendary thing, so that's a little bit different because they're more invested in getting my stuff made. But cool. But now, like for a while before the Legendary overall, when people were interested in optioning my books, I just kind of felt like, ugh, I don't want to deal with it. Like it's never going to happen. Like you almost, it's like you want to get to the point where you're like Michael Crichton, where you're just like, you have it. If it doesn't get greenlit in a year, I get it back. Like,
I hear you, man.
Like just make people greenlight the stuff. Just get out of the way.
I was going to say another Netflix thing, and I don't know if you saw it, but I want to talk to writers who I respect and see what they thought. Did you watch the adaptation of Victor Santos's Polar on Netflix?
I haven't seen that yet, actually. It's in my queue, and I was going to watch it because I was like, oh, that looks really cool.
Yeah.
And I realized, I was like, oh, yeah, it's based on an Oni book, too. So,
Yep.
Yeah, everyone's got their Netflix movies being made out of their things except for me, those bastards. I was so mad when they put up a show called Criminal, and I was like, you motherfuckers. Luckily, it's an international show. It's not, so I can still use the title if we sell a criminal show here. But I was just like, those motherfuckers. That's my word. All right, on that note.
Yes, I was going to say, Ed, God bless you, son. It was awesome, and I love that we had this kind of rambling conversation because it was incredibly entertaining. I know people are going to love it. So, as always, thank you for your time.
All right, thanks. Bye.
Great catching up with Ed Brubaker, and once again we've got another list of interesting television shows and films to check out and other things to read. Man, check out Friday, check out Pulp, and other great books. And, of course, your local comic shop has tons of Ed Brubaker stuff in their backstock waiting for you, whether it's his Captain America or Batman stuff, wonderful things from both Marvel and DC over the decades that are all worthy of your attention. Always happy to talk to him. Hope we do it again sooner than later here on Word Balloon. Thanks a lot for listening. More great stuff coming up from Word Balloon. I mentioned it earlier. I'm doing live video chats this week with Matthew Rosenberg and Scotty Young. Also, we're going to be talking about the comic market and all the various changes with at least two of my favorite comic book journalists, Heidi McDonald and Vanita Rogers. Heidi, of course, from The Beat. Vanita from Newsarama. They are two of my favorite people to see when I see them at conventions, and whether I appear with them on panels or just shoot the shit with them in the after hours or, on a Word Balloon podcast. It's great. I don't know if Heidi and I have ever done an official podcast. We've done panels together and certainly, discuss things when we see each other at conventions. Vanita's an old friend, and we've done that for years, and also she's shown up here on Word Balloon. It's been a couple years since Vanita's been on. But I know they are talking to more people beyond creators and getting a fuller picture, I think, than I am. And that's why I lean on them to give me perspective of what's going on and what they're seeing and hearing. So that'll be great, and those will be happening on Friday afternoon as video conversations and then also as podcasts as well. I hope you're enjoying the videos. I hope you're enjoying the audios. Please let me know what you think. John@wordballoon.com for emails. And follow me on Facebook and Twitter, at John Word Balloon, and of course, just under my name, John Suntress, and the Word Balloon Network, and Word Balloon Live on Facebook. Thanks a lot for checking out all the programming that I've been putting out on Word Balloon the last 6 or so weeks. And I'm not slowing down. More great content coming up. Amazing conversations with some of our favorite creatives, and looking forward to sharing them with you in the days and weeks ahead. Thank you greatly to the League of Word Balloon listeners that help me out each month via Patreon, patreon.com/wordballoon. And also thank you greatly to my buddies at Aftershock Comics who are itching to resume publication at the end of this month with two great books to wrap up the month of May. Also, conversation with Joe Pruitt, one of the editorial leads at Aftershock and one of the founders of Aftershock. We'll be talking about the Aftershock philosophy on a Word Balloon conversation coming in the days ahead. Until next time, thank you greatly. Word Balloon is a copyright feature of Shaky Productions. Copyright 2020. Stay safe. Stay healthy.